no tracking sheet or anything.
I didn't think I discussed anything about the traffic. Yeah, we're supposed to go by the rules.
Oh, I know, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. All right. All right, appreciate everybody coming out tonight. Matt, I'll turn it over to you for your.
Okay, it's 6 o'clock. I will call the Streets and Sidewalks Committee meeting to order. The first item on our agenda this evening, we have Tom Persinger here from the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio to do a quick presentation in regards to information on the Day Street crossing. After he does his presentation, we'll request comments, questions from the public. And so there'll be a little back and forth there. And then when the public's finished with their questions, council will have an opportunity to ask some questions as well. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Persinger at this time.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
There we go. Awesome. So, evening, everybody. My name is Tom Persinger. I'm from the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio, Rail Division. Here to talk about the Day Street crossing. A big thing that we do at the PUCO is we have a program that upgrades rail crossings, looks for improvements, ways to make things safer. So just some basic statistics. Ohio is number 3 in the nation in terms of amount of track that we have in the state. Over 5,000 miles of that, and of that, there's currently 5,626 public grade crossings. Day Street's one of them, and there's 5,625 other ones across the state. And that includes 39 railroads as well as Amtrak. 70% of the crossings, they either have flashing lights or they have the lights and gates. 84 Ohio's 88 counties have railroad crossings. And because of that high number of rail traffic, it kind of makes sense that we'll be among the leaders of crashes and fatalities because we have so many more crossings out there. Which, if we're 3rd nationally in track and we're only 9th in fatalities from traffic accidents, it's not good to be in the top 10, but it's definitely something we're always striving to improve upon. Ohio State Specific Grade Crossing Program came into effect in 1990, and after 26 years, it's shown some improvements on that because we've gotten some of the incidents down, fatalities down. The program is kind of working in that regard where we're looking at crossings, installing the equipment, and that includes doing some closures in a number of other communities. So in case you're wondering what the rail map looks like in Ohio, it's all over the place. That kind of gives you a rough idea. Nearly every community has rail traffic. Here in Ravenna, for a town your size, you have 3 different railroads that, come through your city limits. The main one everybody able to hear me? Am I picking up on do I need to stand closer to the microphone or? Good over here. Just want to verify. So when it comes to looking at railroad crossings, there's a couple of different players in play. The railroad naturally. And then another entity involved is something we call the LHA, Local Highway Authority, who handles the street that intersects that railroad crossing. And the city of Ravenna is involved in 9 of these railroad crossings. When you get outside the city limits, you have townships Portage County will be involved in some of it, ODOT's involved in some of it, if we're talking state routes. So, you know, some of you may have a question about, I think outside the city limits, there's, I think Red Brush Road, I think is a road that has a railroad crossing. You know, it's not a city of Ravenna jurisdiction, it may be a township, it may be Portage County. But, you know, there's multiple possibilities as your LHA out there. Today, we're mainly here to talk about the Akron-Barberton Railroad crossing, mainly Day Street, and to a little bit of a lesser extent, Chestnut Street. So, when we're looking at railroad grade crossing programs, there's two types of them. There's a federal program and a state program. When we're looking at the federal crossings, there's a formula that we use to rank every single crossing in the state of Ohio. The higher the number, it's deemed a bigger risk if you have the higher number. So, crossing number 1, I believe, there's a road up by Sandusky. Anybody who goes to Cedar Point, there's a road up there called Perkins Road. It's constantly somewhere between number 1 and number 5 in the state in terms of riskiest crossings, because they've had a number of accidents up there. So that's up there, you know, number 1, number 2. And then on the other side of the scale, maybe there's some railroad crossing out there that gets 1 train a week. There's a good chance that's going to be down somewhere in the 5,000s. So the federal program focuses mainly on the higher ranked ones, trying to, you know, provide lights and gates if there's no lights and gates there. If it's simply a light only crossing, they look at just we're adding gates to that, and maybe upgrade the circuitry and things like that as well. And all of that, because, you know, working with the federal government's always an easy process. Everything has to be approved through them. So it can be a little slower moving because you have to get that federal approval, but that's one program. I'm mainly on the state side here, you know, being with the PUCO, so it only goes through us if you're involved in the state program. So, and how something comes to our attention is we're looking at all those crossings that aren't the highly ranked ones, because a city, an LHA, has brought it to our attention. City of Ravenna could be calling us saying, hey, we have a problem with this crossing, or any of the nearby townships may be informing us about something that may not show up on that rank. Maybe there's near misses on traffic accidents. Because the formula takes accidents into account, but it doesn't register the close calls. So, you know, it's you know, it's a big help there when, you know, locals can, you know, provide input and let us know, because with 5,600 grade crossings, we can't see everything all the time. So, you know, the cities, the villages, the townships, you all definitely help out on that front. Now, but the state program though, the PUCO doesn't necessarily cover every single cent on it. We'll cover a good chunk of it. A lot of that depends upon various factors in your community. You know, what are your, and some of it mirrors the federal formula, but then there's other things we look at that's not so much in data. Do you have a park nearby? Do you have schools nearby? Things like that. Pedestrian trail, which I know you guys here have that Portage County bike trail that runs along that railroad. So that's something else that catches our attention, and that can up the number of the state contribution we're able to chip in. And normally the railroad's going to pay a minimum of 10% for that upgrade. So if we're looking at a $200,000 project, whatever railroad crossing we're looking at, they're going to be kicking in at least 10%, sometimes more. So I mentioned the federal programs. It's with the higher ranked ones. The one thing I dislike about the federal programs, it seems like they're more reactive than anything, especially if an accident happens. You hate to see accidents happen. You hate to have that sort of a thing happen. But once it does happen, it can shoot you up in the rank. Locally, there was an accident on the one CSX crossing on Diamond Street earlier this year. The rank leading up to that was 545. You already had lights and gates and stuff like that there, so that was already in place, but because of winter weather and the report I read, and correct me if I'm wrong, it looked like winter weather was a contributor to that accident, where the car somehow like slid off into the track or something. There was no fatality from that, but because of that accident, the rank went from 545 up to 87 in the state, 87th riskiest crossing. But if you want to see something else that can really show you how a crossing can shoot up, over in Mercer County near the Indiana line, the village of Coldwater had a crossing that had an accident, was ranked 2344 in the state, kind of middle of the pack. They had an accident last summer, they shot up to 327. So recent accidents definitely bump you up the list, and now it's just a picture of kind of what happened. The train didn't really do anything. It was kind of you can say a truck driver that had his GPS telling them the wrong thing and wrong place, wrong time. Nobody was hurt. Just it did a number on the building there. But so yeah, back to the state upgrade. Some local examples we can look at. There's a project up near Sylvania, outside of Toledo, that we're looking at doing a 56% share, because the project's going to be in coordination with a roadway improvement. They're like widening from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, and as part of that, they got to relocate devices and circuitry. So the proposal ends up having us providing like 56% for it. Something similar in City of Defiance, $285,000 for their new lights and gates at a crossing along with a city road project. And I'll state that the money was strictly for rail projects. We weren't paying to have them pave a road or anything. It was strictly new warning devices, gates, the circuitry for it. And then there's a proposal out in Richland County that PUC was going to kick 45% in. City of Shelby was 45, and then the railroad was 10. That one kind of a work in progress, but yeah, locally, when we're looking at other projects the city of Ravenna has had, you see the $5,000 and $7,500 numbers. Those were for LED light upgrades, putting in the brighter LED lights that with the hope of being able to see better. And then there were 2 other projects that put lights and gates in your Cleveland Road and your Freedom Street, where I don't know offhand what the percentages came out to, but Akron-Barberton Railroad covered the remainder of those crossings. And they were kind of that middle of the pack crossings. I believe maintenance issues were part of the reason for them pursuing that, which is also a reason why they're pursuing an upgrade on Oakwood. Is the signal box on it, I think, was starting to rust out. It's in rough shape, so we gave them what our number was for the contribution on that. I think it was like 75%. Because of the high number of buses that our data had going across there. I don't know if there was like a school bus garage or something over that way that kind of shoots the number up. So when we see that, that's something that catches our attention, because nobody wants to. That's one place you don't want to see an accident happen, because we all may have, whether it's our own children or somebody else's children we know. Similar things kind of happening with Diamond. There was less traffic there, so there was less money going on there, but there was still a little bit of truck traffic. So that's one thing that was in there. And then another source of state money that came to the city was from Ohio Rail Development Commission, where they provided a $175,000 grant for the new Menards facility that's coming in. I don't know if it's done or it's still. It's nothing yet. So it's some point in the future, ideally. Yeah, maybe my 4-year-old will be we'll get a job interview when she's 21 or something up there. But right when it opens maybe. But all in all, when you look at the projects as well as the ORDC grant, the state's provided, just shy of $1 million in terms of upgrades to the rail system, up to this point. So, going forward, and the big part of why I'm here today is when we're talking Day Street, when we're talking Chestnut, it's because of the consolidation program where we'll look at like a corridor or look at crossings, and if we see that it may make sense to potentially consider closing a crossing, as well as in consulting with the community, people in city government, as well as, all the residents coming out here. That's one program that's out there where, okay, we close this crossing that may not be utilized as much as the others, or for other consideration, and we'll fully fund an upgrade of another crossing. So, and it may be something that, say if we pursued Chestnut as a state project, maybe it's only 60% or 70% PUCO funding that goes into it, and maybe the railroad doesn't want to go beyond the 10%. So a lot of times that may, and if there was, a strong willingness to get that upgraded by the city may kick in to make that all happen. But under the consolidation program, railroad doesn't have to worry, city doesn't have to worry. We fully fund the upgrade of the railroad crossing, and then for the closure of that other crossing, I know we can kick in up to $8,000 for whatever expenses come from that. So, and somewhat locally, village or city of East Canton, we're in the midst of an upgrade on their Wood Street in their town, and their Market Street's going to be closed as part of that arrangement and that agreement. So, and a big thing of what we look at is something that's identified as a possible redundant crossing, which Day Street may have characteristics of that. I don't live up here. I mean, ultimately, I'm here to get input from everybody, because I don't live in the community. That's a big reason why I'm here. I know the daily traffic numbers I think we're among the lowest of the crossings here in the city. Hazards present, we look at things like whether the sight lines, is it by an intersection, is there a history of prior accidents? We take into account complaints. Is the city calling, us complaining about something? Is the railroad calling? Are citizens calling in about issues? We look for easy nearby alternate crossings that shouldn't take too much of an additional time to, if previously going from point A to point B is going to result in a longer time, how much of an inconvenience are we looking at? We take a look at local input. Everybody out here today is may have a, a comment or two about that. And then another thing we look at are changes. Is there new industries, new development, new roads? Because sometimes if a site gets redeveloped, there may not be a need to have that crossing if there's access or something from another direction, like if you're putting in a shopping center or a factory and everything connects to the street to the north instead of to the south. So, from aerial view, what we see with Day Street, we have the pedestrian trail that's right there, as you may be aware of. Central Avenue, that makes for an easy-ish detour if that were to be closed, because it can just curve right into Central Avenue, and then hit Chestnut all over to the side. And then there's kind of further out. One reason we're kind of looking at Day Street, it looks like it's only about 0.3 miles in terms of total length. It goes about, I think, a tenth to 0.2 miles to the north, and then another 1/10 to 2/10 miles to the south. It's when you compare it to Chestnut Street, it's much shorter overall in duration. Some pictures there. Yeah, you can kind of see, if you look at the right picture, you have the stop line for the railroad track that's like before the intersection. So that Because in theory, if you see, in theory, if the lights are flashing, you should be stopping at the white line waiting for that train to pass. Well, how does that work if you're a car coming from that direction there? That kind of raises a little red flag that kind of caught our attention when we were checking it out. And then we'll jump into the data comparison here. When we're looking at traffic count, really if it's below 1,000 cars a day, that's something that definitely catches our attention. Here you're at 355. You're not one of those 100 car, 200 car a day things, but you're not up to 1,000. So in terms of detour, it doesn't seem like it would be. When you look at the west detour and the east detour, it doesn't look like it's going to cause too much of a traffic headache in that regard. Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody. But yeah, when you look at that map, when we're looking at pedestrians, when you have that trail, you have the sidewalks, to essentially get around and about. You can essentially take the bike trail either to the east or the west and walk 2/10 of a mile, or ride your bike 2/10 of a mile, or maybe you have a Segway 2/10 of a mile, whatever it might be. And then when you're looking at if you're driving it, it's roughly 3/10 of a mile, assuming Google is correct in their distance that's on there. But all in all, in terms of if you're looking at the quickest detour possible, you're looking at roughly half a mile. If you're going around, essentially going to go around in a circle the east way as opposed to the west way. West way is a little bit longer, but you have that. Something else we noticed, Day Street is a much more narrow street. I don't know, and maybe this is something that can be brought up when the comments happen. How do delivery trucks or school buses navigate that? I'm curious, is there parking? Anybody know if there's parking allowed on both sides of Day Street or just one side?
One side.
I don't think there's any.
Okay.
Side or the other.
So,
I know over the tracks you can't, but
okay.
the people.
I don't know if our law enforcement friends enforce no parking on one side of the street or not, but some towns do have that. But yeah, usually have narrow street. If you have concerns on like first responder response, if you have a narrow street and a lower speed limit, is the ambulance going to have to wait for other cars to get out of the way? Because it's my understanding Chestnut, that's a little wider, so it's easier for them to just kind of move off to the side, and the ambulance or police officer or fire department can zip on through. So, yeah, then Chestnut Street, you're under 8,000 cars a day, but it looks like it's a main artery because you got the high school up there. Looks like you have a hospital a little bit north of that. When we were up there, just looking at the crossing, we saw quite a few buses and trucks at 10:30 in the morning. So there was. So yeah, when we're looking at the up. But yeah, we have upgrade. More about Chestnut Street. It currently only has flashing lights. We do everything with this upgrade. There'll be gates there as well, which. And I don't know how the design would be, but you have the pedestrian traffic there, so the gate could possibly come down over the sidewalk to prevent somebody that maybe has the earbuds in, that's not paying all that much attention as they're walking or something. But yeah, we would look at it connects up to the hospital. Looked like we had numbers of 35 school buses going across Chestnut, and the different truck traffic. It looks like you had county buses going across there as well. And then another concern, which I wish the railroad would be here to elaborate a little bit more on that. So, and I'm sure there may be questions that's going to be better suited for the railroad to answer. I'll try to make a note and email them tomorrow and see if we can get a response on something if it's something brought up that I'm not that I can't really answer for you. But they were saying that it would simplify the circuitry network for all these devices, because I guess a number of the rail crossing circuitry is from, I think, the 60s and 70s, which technology has advanced a little bit in that time. So that may be one thing to help them, help them do maintenance and keep things keep things safe without having anything come from that. Excuse me. So you have a picture of Chestnut Street. So, so yeah, essentially we can call it a proposal. I mean, it's nothing has been thrown out there in terms of an agreement or anything yet, but depending on how tonight goes, could be something. But yeah, Day Street, you would currently be looking at a dead end on the north side, possible cul-de-sac. The southern portion will be easy. You can kind of connect to the Central Avenue and have it continue on. And what would happen here, PUCO would fully fund the replacement of flashing lights. We put in new flashing lights, upgraded circuitry, new bells. More than likely there would be 2 bells at that because of your pedestrians, especially with that bike trail that's right there. Generally, a project like that is looking like it usually runs about $250,000 to $300,000. It's always possible some of that could be a little bit more if there's a utility relocation or something that's unforeseen that happens that needs addressed on. Those things do sometimes happen. And in particular, why Akron-Barberton has brought this to our attention is if Day Street were to be closed and Chestnut were to be upgraded, every Akron-Barberton crossing within the city of Ravenna will have had upgrades over the last, I think, 5 years, modern circuitry, all that sort of a thing. You may have heard, discussion, they talk about, America's aging infrastructure and stuff like that. For what that's worth, in terms of the signal equipment, you would have relatively younger devices that would, you would hope that would work better and more efficient than the older devices. Because I believe it was on Oakwood. That circuit box, I think, was from like the 1960s or 1970s, and I know every time it rains, somebody has to go out and do like an adjustment or something on it. So that's one thing. So I'm down to my last slide here. Essentially, you can look at Day Street however you want. I mean, if you close the crossing, there's going to be pros and cons to it. Does it mean it's a quieter street because you don't have as much through traffic? Is it safer for your kids? Maybe you have, I don't know what life is like for a kid around here.
Idiots jumping the tracks with their cars.
Yeah, we have that quite often on Day Street.
So, in my reckless younger days as a kid growing up in the 90s, I always remember playing football in the street. Because that was, a wide open area to play football for that Ohio State scholarship I never got. So, you would have that as a safer function, but then, maybe you have concerns on slower first responder times or other things I haven't mentioned or thought of. But something else to consider, especially among, when we're looking at economic stuff and development and stuff like that. I know the Menards facility is something that's a work in progress that I don't know what they told you in terms of job numbers were coming in the community from that, but as that's moving along, maybe you're able to get another employer to come in that would utilize that rail line, which would involve increased rail traffic, but it's something that you could possibly present like, hey, we have there's updated train signals here. We don't really have any problems with that. So, you know, the state has put money into that investment, so we don't have to worry about this being part of that aging infrastructure. So you'd be able to access it pretty easily, and I don't know if anyone here has dealt with Akron Barberton before, or if they have any preconceived notion. As somebody that works with the different railroads across this state, I believe they're based out of Barberton. They're local. They're a local railroad. I'm not going to name names, but certain larger railroads that have made the news, their executives all are in Atlanta, Georgia. So it's a lot easier to reach the executives for the Akron Barbertons, the RJ Cormans.
Was there a reason they're not here
I
tonight?
was just gonna ask that, thank you.
That's a good question, because I
Can I-
had emailed them and asked them if they were coming out, and they said that they weren't planning on it.
I think I'm not surprised. Matt, can I ask some general questions real quick, just about the scope of the project? Before we,
just clarify the proposal of what they're
That's-
actually,
yeah.
just clarify that, and then we can move into questions, I
yeah,
think.
can we tee up, I guess, I have some general questions about the proposal that we can tee up some of the concerns of the residents if they want to voice their opinions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah. So you want to,
So
proposal on what you're suggesting right now?
So just to clarify the proposal.
Yes.
The proposal basically is to close Day Street, and then 100% of the cost to upgrade the Chestnut Crossing would be provided to upgrade that crossing. Is that correct?
From the state of Ohio through PUCO, the lights and gates and bells with new circuitry would all be paid 100% from the PUCO.
Okay.
Where we wouldn't need the city to contribute any funds to that project. It would be covered completely by us because Day Street would be closed. When it comes to closing Day Street, we are willing to provide up to $8,000 to provide stuff for it. Maybe you're putting guardrails up, maybe some new signage, whatever you may need for that $8,000 to cover for that. So that is rail improvement funds that we would be using to completely upgrade Chestnut.
And
Thank you.
what is, and maybe I missed this real quick, your relationship to the railroad, you're independent?
Correct. I'm with the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio.
So you work for the state of Ohio?
Correct. I'm with the state of Ohio. I'm my title is Rail Project Specialist with the state of Ohio. I look over PUCO approvals of the federal projects that come through, make sure that a lot of them are what are called MUTCD compliant, with proper distances of grade crossings and stuff like that.
Do you get any commission from the railroad?
I do not.
So you solely are based, your monies come from the state of Ohio?
Correct.
Okay.
The grade protection fund, and it's somewhere in chapter 49 of the Ohio Revised Code. Essentially, there's a fund that's paid through motor vehicle fuel tax. $100,000 every month, $1.2 million a year goes into a fund for projects like this.
Okay.
So,
And I guess my other quick
Sure.
question is you're talking, and I don't mean to interrupt because I know the audience has questions, but just so that kind of understand this a little bit better. My understanding, wouldn't the railroad, with the money that the railroad has, why wouldn't they be responsible for upkeeping their own railroad? Like, the money they're making, the cost associated to the railroad, why wouldn't they want to upgrade and make their railroads more appeasable to use? And, why would they even try to use, our money or, use that over our head?
right. Couple of lines of thinking on it. All of our contracts, when you look at them, and this is one thing I think I forgot to put in the presentation, railroads are always responsible for ongoing maintenance. Essentially what the state money does is it's a big one-time injection that allows them to buy this upgraded circuitry, these new lights and gates, but then after that, they're in charge of maintaining it. Maybe there's lights that go out, they have to replace the lights. We're not giving them money to replace their lights. That's standard maintenance, they take care of it. So essentially, once the new lights and gates are put in, our relationship with them for that is done. They have to maintain everything after that. And in terms of, excuse me, of, you know, why should the city contribute or something to that, you know, what we're looking at is these grade crossings, you essentially have city, township, county, state road, meaning railroad. So in a way, it not just benefits the railroad, it's also a safety benefit for the local community, because you have, you know, the railroad meeting a city street, city highway, state highway, township highway, things along those lines. So generally, that's kind of the view where, you know, it gives the city a little bit of incentive to be be involved with it, to make sure things are done, their part of the thing is done the way they want. A big thing that kind of comes into play on that is, say, the surface. You may have a surface that's wood, you may have a surface that's rubber, you may have a surface that's cement, asphalt, you know, different things like that. It's just another way for involvement of that sort of thing.
Can I ask you 2 questions real quickly? Are you the main regulatory body from the state that regulates railroads?
Yes.
Okay.
We do have a field inspector component that goes out and looks at every railroad crossing in the state of Ohio at least once a year, sometimes more if we get complaints. Which for the folks that are here, if you, I brought some magnets and some handouts on there that have phone numbers on there. So if some other railroad crossing is you see malfunctioning lights or something like that, or you have other complaints, there's numbers on there that you can call to either like notify us, or the big thing is if you say you see malfunctioning lights, there's no train but the lights are going crazy.
When it storms, it does on A Street.
So you may have something like that, and there's that, you probably are familiar with that little blue sign that hangs on there that says in case of emergency or something like that. That should be the first number that's called, because that goes directly to the railroad and that tells them, hey, get your rear end out there and get this fixed. We have a problem. So, so something in an emergency, call the railroad. If it's something else that may not be an immediate emergency, you know, you can let us know on our website by calling us. I personally am a fan of the website because it gives you fields to fill in. You can give us the DOT number of that crossing. You can provide different information and write it out, and with that we can forward it to the appropriate inspector. The inspector, I believe, for Portage County, I think he works out of like Warren or somewhere nearby. Somebody a lot closer than I am, being down near Columbus. So, but we can definitely have, if complaints and stuff like that pop up, you can definitely have somebody come out and look at a complaint if there is a complaint in that regard.
So my second question was simply, your motivation for doing this is this ongoing 30-year consolidation program to get to 25% closing 25% of the crossings that were in existence in 1991. That's what I read here?
The 25% number, that comes from the federal government. I think that's kind of ambitious, because I've seen enough crossings in these different towns, and I don't know how many crossings were closed in that first decade from the 1990 to 2000, or even in the first 20 years of that. Right. At this point, and these are kind of older-ish brochures, but
I'm just saying the motivation is you're targeting certain crossings in certain communities because you have that directive, whether it's from the federal government or the state, to try to close more crossings, and you're picking the ones that make the most sense. Am I putting words in your mouth, or is that kind of why you're here? Because I mean, you just didn't wake up one day and say, hey, let's go close the crossing at Day Street. There was some thought behind it.
Yeah, really what we're just looking at is generally it's the view is the safest railroad crossing is a closed crossing. Because if a crossing is closed, you don't have to worry about the Amazon truck, the high school kid, the guy trying to leap over the railroad crossing, and he takes out the flowers you spent 3 hours planting the weekend before. You don't have to worry about that. Ever since I've taken my position, it's never been brought up to me about like, oh, we need to close 25% of the crossings or anything like that. the main concern is just kind of looking at things case by case. Is there something that might be duplicative? Do we need to, does it make sense to have all these certain crossings open if there's an easy access to another one? If we're out, if we were talking about crossings in the country, if I wasn't talking to the city of Ravenna today and I was talking to, fill in the blank township here in Portage County, there probably wouldn't be a closure going on because, the country roads are much wider and everything like that. But here, and, I kind of laid that out in the data, it looked like it could be a candidate for closure, but ultimately that's why I'm here. So when I look at a closure, I'm not trying to be aggressive or anything in that regard. I'm not getting directions from my chief to get them closed, but if it looks like a possibility, we definitely toss it out there.
Well,
Thank-
I'm sorry, real quick, with the crossing closed though, that would mean that the speed of the train could go much faster, correct? You wouldn't have to now follow the same guidelines of slowing down before the intersection or right now with the speed that some of the trains go down, you'd be able to increase the speed, correct?
In that section, I would probably not, because I think the best when we're looking at distance, look at the bike trail, because it looked like if you walk the bike trail to the east to the next crossing, you're 0.2 of a mile. You go west 0.2 of a mile. It wouldn't make sense to hike up the speed that the train can go for roughly 0.4 of a mile. And I know there's considerations that go into effect when you're inside a city, that you can only go certain speeds unless certain precautions are made. Like if it was an Amtrak line, I think Amtrak lines can go up to like 79 miles an hour. Here, I believe the speed, I think, was 5 or 10 miles an hour. So I believe there would be, even if they proposed a speed increase, I know there's a way to like oppose it or something where you would contact the FRA. I can look more into that process if that ever becomes a possibility, but I can pretty much tell you with 99.9% certainty the speed would not go up in that corridor, because roughly within 0.4 of a mile you have 2 other crossings right there. So
Thank you. Okay, I think at this time, we'll take comments and questions from the public, please, if there are any.
Yeah.
Make sure they state their name.
Yeah, please.
Would you want to move up to the microphone and,
Yep, just state your name and address, please, for the record.
My name's Sean English. I live at 511 Day Street. One of the only two houses that are gonna be affected by it. But we have a special needs girl that has to have a bus every day. How's that gonna turn around when it gets closed? I'm for closing it, cause I'm tired of people jumping them tracks. I've been at many people's house ready to get physical over it. I've seen them doing 80 mile an hour jumping tracks, breaking their cars. But how are they gonna turn buses around if they do close it? And what's it gonna, are they just gonna put up some cinder blocks? Oh, don't go this way no more, or are they really gonna make it decent?
Yeah, I think our city engineer, Mr. Finney, can help with some of those questions.
If the road is closed, let me restate that. To close the road, we will build a cul-de-sac on the north side of the tracks. And it will be a cul-de-sac large enough for emergency vehicles to turn around in, which makes for a large cul-de-sac.
So that would involve taking part of our yard and the yard across the road.
Potentially the lot on the east side, not the lot on the west side.
Right.
So
That's far.
a layout that would work is called an offset cul-de-sac. So it pretty much is
Right.
twisted over on the other property. So it would be split possibly between the railroad land and then the other resident. And those are the details that we haven't worked out.
Right.
But I know city council and the fire chief will not accept anything but a cul-de-sac in some fashion.
Right.
It wouldn't involve tearing a house down or anything.
Well, no, I just
So,
mean,
but
yeah, you gotta be able to turn around. Other than that,
Right.
anything else is just an inconvenience on driving, but
Oh, sure.
I don't drive, so I don't
Next person?
Nobody else? Cliff Soto, 464 Woodland Street, Ravenna. I'm not attacking you because obviously you have no, you're not for or against it, you're doing your job.
I'm just.
But I want to ask some
letting
questions,
information
so it
educate,
looks
so-
like that I might be going against. Safety. How many accidents have happened on Day Street?
Involving a train, our database shows 0.
Okay. What is the rank of that crossing? Then it would have to be way down in the 5,000s then.
I believe I think it was in the mid to low 4,000s. Because they do get train traffic. I believe they get 2 trains a day, but they're not in the 4 trains a week category. So I believe they were in the high 3,000s, low 4,000s range.
Okay, if we're not gonna close or even thinking of closing up Chestnut Street, why are we weighing the difference between Chestnut Street and Day Street? You're saying, well, there's much more traffic over there and everything. Well,
It's part of a package deal. This is the way it's been presented.
well, that's just, brings up a question mark against, some of these questions have been answered already, emergency access. We're talking about money. It looks quite clear to me that the railroad wants you and everybody else here, either through our state money, through our pocket, or the city's money to do something, to take care of that so they don't have to pay for it. And it was brought up that the city might be on the hook to do something for upgrades eventually. When's the last time anybody in Ravenna here, we paid to upgrade a crossing?
I don't know of any.
You don't go to other people's businesses and they come to you and say, hey, help us out here, fix this. No, I don't think, right? I mean, how often does that happen?
We did upgrade the crossing at the bike trail a couple different times, and that was because we built the bike trail. We own the bike trail, so we had to improve
Only
that
for what
crossing.
you did in the crossing, though. You weren't doing rail upgrades. You were doing the side over there where the
Right.
trail goes.
People are getting falling.
Okay. ABC Railroad appears that has failed to do upgrades or make crossings safe over the decades, even though we haven't had any accidents there. But that was their responsibility to upgrade that crossing if it was necessary. Now the state and the city is going to help foot the bill, 100% by the state PUCO. It's your money, comes out of your pocket. Speed of the trains, that was already answered. Again, it just appears to me that it was said to us originally that it was something about, well, it might be on you, the city, if you don't do this, that you're going to be responsible for this. And I don't see how that could happen. It shouldn't happen anyway. Could be wrong on that, but no.
Thanks, Cliff. Anybody else? Questions, comments?
I'm Dennis Waters, and I live right at the corner of Central and almost Bay Street on the east side. And I heard Mr. Finney say the cul-de-sac go on the north side of the tracks. Then they'd block that off, keep the lights there, right?
If the crossing is closed, you're referring to the flashing lights for the railroad
Yeah.
crossing, they would be removed.
Okay, so the lights wouldn't stay there.
Correct, yeah, because if
Just
the
railing
crossing
and
is
going.
closed, there would probably be railing up, there would be something there to block anybody from going over the crossing.
Okay.
So,
And then they'd make Central just jog over to Chestnut.
correct, yeah, it would hop
Okay.
over, I think, the 2/10 of a mile or however long it is to hit up Chestnut.
Okay. Then emergency vehicles and everything go the same way if they were coming from the fire station or whatever. Okay.
There's a couple pieces of information that hasn't been discussed. A couple years ago, the railroad was looking to upgrade their tracks in general because of the Menards project. They were gearing up for the Menards project. The Menards project was funded to have a siding put onto that property off of the existing rail, with the intent of shipping through rail instead of through trucks. Ray Harner on the GE property has also built a transloading site. So there's enough space, I believe, to store 20 train cars on that property. He's already built a scale on that property. He does not have a business to run the transloading site. So we're not sure if LG, they have not committed to using rail yet, but they may in the future. So this will increase the train traffic. It was my understanding that they're committed to 10 miles an hour or less because of the proximities of all of those crossings. But again, anything could change. That's just what we've been told over the years. So when we're looking ahead, it isn't necessarily just what you see today. I mean, you guys have been there longer, I'm sure, but we've seen one train a week pulling 2 or 3 cars, and then you see a couple trains. There's another business that has discussed expanding. West Rock has discussed a large expansion. I don't know what that means as far as trains, train traffic, but right now they're the only customer on that line from Kent to Ravenna. But they still bring in 2 or 3 cars.
Yeah, it only goes once a day.
Right. Yeah, but again, potentially it could increase, and what council felt important to convey is, and as Tom, and I think I put in your letters when I wrote those letters, was,
None of these people are here because of any letter you sent.
well,
None of them got it.
we mailed them.
When did you mail them?
They were mailed Thursday.
Nobody got them. She was in the tracks.
Okay, well,
Thursday?
all right.
Seth,
We-
did you guys get a letter?
They went
Do you know?
in the mail,
We might.
they went in the mail Wednesday or Thursday.
Thursday, I heard Thursday.
That's not enough
Hey,
time.
Matt, when you're done asking questions, I had a few.
All
Okay.
right, anyhow, well,
Do we have,
So-
oh,
well, anyways, with that, the rail, PUCO has stated they will contribute a certain amount. Once they spend that amount, if we wanted upgrades in the future, the city would have to pay 100% of those upgrades. So in the future, if a cul-de-sac were requested, then the city would be on the hook. And I can appreciate what Cliff said. I think we would lean pretty hard on the railroad to do that, but it's just, it's a discussion. Obviously, no decision is gonna be made tonight. And I do agree the railroad should have been here. And I'm disappointed because it was alluded that they would be.
And it's my understanding of that proposed cul-de-sac, I think a significant portion of that land is AB's land that they would contribute to that. So I don't know how much land you'd be looking at to complete that. It would need to be acquired from the appropriate landowner.
Right.
Matt, you have a couple more people.
Okay. I'm Angela Huth at 511 Day. I feel like see pros and cons in it. My biggest concerns right now is obviously I have a special needs child that's gonna need busing. She's very medically involved, so I need to make sure that we're getting proper plows, emergency stuff, and easy access for her to get help if needed. But my other concerns too, obviously, in closing that, is we do have lots of people that jump the tracks. I don't feel safe with my children up front, because we never know what car's speeding down, going to jump the track and come in our front yard. So I don't allow my children to play up front. So that's another pro in closing it. But my concern is you said you would take the signals out. So we're just gonna put in the cul-de-sac, but the other road's gonna still be there. So we have little kids running up and down Day Street
They
that
would-
would be crossing that.
There would be no way to cross it if we put a cul-de-sac, whether we used guardrails to cross, so cars couldn't go across, there'd be some way to.
So all the little
Protect
boys
it.
that live down on Highland, Springfield, that come to my house, where are these little boys? They're gonna be expected to come down Chestnut?
Oh, no, the sidewalks will still be open.
They can still walk over it. They
There's
just know.
20 kids that cross through that.
Mhm.
That intersection right there too is a main hub that 20-plus kids go to the end of Beecher and Chestnut to catch a bus as
Yes, I
well.
was just
Yeah,
gonna
yeah,
say,
yeah.
There's at least 20, and that's not once a day, that's 4 times a day, plus the high schoolers. They use Day Street as a main walkway to get to and from the high school.
yeah, the bus
Daily.
stops, yeah, where our bus stops are, which it is gonna be a slight inconvenience to go all the way around for bus stops. But the bus stop is over Beecher and Chestnut. And there's, I'm not kidding, 30
Sure.
kids on this bus. I mean,
Stop.
at the bus stop, just at
Yeah,
this stop.
they would still be able to walk and cross.
So, and a
all of
lot
the
of these
crossings
kids
in that
do
regard.
come with no parents in the morning, so that's another safety concern of walking around and not being able to cut through. Because they are walking from both sides of the street up there. And I'm talking kindergarten, yeah, there's kindergartners coming up there without parents. So that's another, just concern that I have, that, trying to think of anything else.
I know there's nobody here from the school, but I don't know, maybe it may merit talking with, transportation director of the local school to see if they could possibly put a new bus stop on the north side of it.
They're struggling as it is, that won't happen. We're doubling up buses and drivers and kids, we can't afford the bus drivers, so that won't work.
Yeah, they've been
Shortages.
looking for more drivers for quite some time.
Okay, anybody else from the public?
I do have to say, I know you guys are for the closing, I'm not. I'm Sherry Katouche, I live at 459 Lincoln Avenue. I use Day Street all the time because of the congestion at Lincoln and Chestnut. And it gets backed up with all the buses 3 or 4 times a day, all the cars, because that's a crossover from Cleveland Road over to Chestnut Street. And you have the hospital traffic, you have the school traffic, you have the kids walking from the high school, from the park, and the chemical place is gonna be opening up. You can't get out. You can be sitting there for 5, 10 minutes trying to get out onto Chestnut Street. I go up Day, and if I gotta go even north on Chestnut, I go to Central or Beecher so I can get out. And this is every day.
Yep.
And how much, if we do the closing, how much is this costing the city for the railroad to have their way? Has anybody checked on an estimate? Property,
It's on my list of questions
paving,
here.
drainage, signage?
That's all to be determined.
So, that's what I have to say.
It's nice
Thank
when
you.
the residents ask the questions for us.
Yes.
She's against the closing.
John McFarland, 7423 Infirmary Road. Do I recall seeing something about they thought using Day Street would be an access to downtown for the trail bikers because of the traffic on Chestnut and Cleveland Road? And you're saying there's no way to cross if they close the crossing.
Well, you're looking at me, John, so I'll answer. There's been several proposals with regard to the bicycle access to downtown. If that were used, which is would not be my favorable location, bicycles and pedestrians will still be able to cross the railroad through the sidewalks that are there. It's just vehicles will not be able to cross the road.
Larry Selenius, 123 North Walnut. And just a quick question. If the sidewalk is going to be open to cross the railroad on Day Street, shouldn't there be some kind of warning lights or a gate, something to alert people that a train is coming?
Yeah, that would involve turning that into a pedestrian crossing. I know some of the larger cities have pedestrian crossings that are strictly there for your bikes and things like that. I know initially the discussion of the closure was to close essentially everything there, sidewalks to prevent any access across. With this out there, as you know, hearing these concerns, that could be something to possibly revisit on our end. I'll have to look at when it comes to closures and stuff, I don't know what it says about pedestrian crossings. That'll be something I may have to get back to you on. Once I talk with our legal and everything, have them beat through the specific regulations that govern this. But I want to tell you yes or tell you no, but I can definitely get back to you and back to all of you about that.
That was one of my questions, so thank you. I'd like to hear that. Anybody else at this time? If not, we'll turn the question. Oh, sure.
Have you guys, I'm Shauna McCoy, 336 State Street. Have you guys looked into, you said there's been no fatalities, no accidents at that railroad. And if we have to use Chestnut, not myself personally, because I refuse to, it's so congested there. Has anybody looked at the fatalities and the accidents that have gone on at that intersection of Chestnut and Central? Because there has been numerous accidents already, and if there's more traffic, people have to use that, it's just going to increase. And plus, the light currently is not in use. And aside from that, I did bring up that with being outside more and whatever, the numerous kids, not my own, not just even the neighborhood kids, but again, the ones back and forth from that high school, be it for school or school events, you know, sports and whatnot, there's numerous kids. And if there's especially no traffic light or something, they're not going to stop in the people on the bike trail. And the train that does come, it barely comes. It comes first thing in the morning. So it's really not something that is even a safety concern at this point anyway. And the lights and the bells that go off there, I can hear them at my house. So they're working order. I mean, if any upgrades are needed, then that's something that they should be doing as it is on their own, not something the city should have to barter with them fixing on the state, you know, should be done anyway. That's just one thing I was wondering about. Aside from Central, is not, that's worse than the track side. I mean, aside from the cars jumping, and I agree with that, but aside from crossing that tracks right there, going down Central is more dangerous to me and a lot of other people versus that one train that comes by a few times a week. So that's my thing.
Thanks for bringing that to the attention, because the data I have access to is strictly involves the train accidents.
There's no
traffic accidents, you know, cars hitting cars at the intersection you specified. I don't have that information, which that may be something to, you know, pull that data and add that to the, you know, this discussion and stuff like that. But, and then when it comes to maintenance, I know maintenance is generally viewed as kind of like the day-to-day maintenance and not so much the one-time maintenance. That's part of where some of the state funds and where some of the cities have chipped in, just kind of that help out that big one-time purchase. But, you know, I certainly understand the feeling there, because, you know, railroads are using it and, well, and that sort of a thing. And especially when we're talking with 40-year equipment, you figure you budget for that or something, but,
Thank you. All right, anybody? Oh, sure.
I agree with her. Is I live on Beecher, I go out to the cemetery every day. That's where my wife's at, that right there. And getting out off of Beecher onto Chestnut and down to Central, you know, if it be more traffic right now, you sit there quite a while. Sometimes I'll go up Day Street, hit Highland and hit the light, so you can back this way, I mean, well, you can't hardly get out there. And especially when you got the buses stopping there, it backs up traffic. When they stop everybody, let kids on and off. And that's my concern is, how it's gonna affect the traffic. I mean, you're gonna have one less street to go down. 'Cause sometimes I go up Chestnut, up Beecher. Sometimes I get down Central, and sometimes I go through up to Lincoln to get out. And sometimes I get up there, the traffic's up down a little bit, so I get out of Lincoln. But, so that's my concern about it.
If there, nobody else at this time, I do ask that if, in the coming days, if you have questions, think of questions, concerns, please reach out to a council member, somebody at City Hall, anybody, and please pass that information along to us. So if there's nothing else at this time, I'll turn the questions over to
Can I ask a few?
council
All right.
members.
You have questions left?
Yeah, I just want to run through the bullet points on this, and I agree I think the biggest goal for us on council was to listen to the residents and not make a decision without hearing from you, and I hear both sides right now. What we'll do logistically after this presentation is follow up, whether it's hand-delivered or mailed out. We've already got the letter written to follow up on this to make sure residents, especially in that area, Day Street, Central, Lincoln, are getting the information so that we're making an informed decision, because once we close the road, more than likely, there's no going back. So we want to make sure that it's the right decision. So the questions just run through some bullet points on here. The total cost associated with Day Street, you're saying on average, they were around $250,000? Is that what you're?
When we're looking at a simple light and gate upgrade project, usually they run 250 to 300,000, unless
And
there's
then-
some sort of a complication that might.
And then you said the total cost that PUCO would contribute would be maximum $80,000 to that. Is that correct?
$80,000 for,
To the Day Street upgrades.
oh, for the date, for the costs associated with the closure, 8,000.
8,000.
Only
Yeah.
8.
Okay.
That's not
So
much.
$8,000. And then just to confirm, Day Street closing, it's not worthy of an upgrade right now in the conversation, just based on traffic.
Correct. We looked at it, we saw the traffic, we saw, let's see, there's a couple of other.
Well, that's all right. I just want to confirm that. And if you're sharing the PowerPoint, then we can pull those up at a later time. We've been here an hour. I want to make sure I just run through some of the bullet points. You said and Bob, I guess, engineering, on the north side, cul-de-sac. On the south side, it would turn into Central with barriers on either side. And then I guess the question that nobody's directly asked, but the Central Chestnut interchange, will that light turn on, and is there any costs associated with that? Will it be an active light? Because to the point that was made earlier, I have family on Lincoln. I understand the pain trying to make a left-hand turn. With the light being turned on, there might be an increase in the time that you're waiting at one of those intersections. Could be, and I don't mean to get into the what if on that, but I guess the question, will that light turn on
You'd have to.
or active?
The
Yeah.
current
Regulate.
discussion does not involve that intersection, that light at that intersection. Currently, that light cannot be turned on
Okay,
because the guts are not in the controller.
Okay.
We would need to replace the complete controller.
So that would be quite an extra cost.
okay.
That'd be a nightmare if you didn't turn that light back on.
Yes.
There was 344 cars on the average, and that's both directions. So if you split that in half, and spread that out over 24 hours again. Now, not necessarily 24 hours, but we have the data.
I didn't,
Okay.
we have the data,
It's
but
it's not similar to Chestnut Street where there's 6,000 or 7,000 cars a day. This is, again, 300, and, it's not uncommon in traffic to count the same car multiple times a day.
But if you're talking
Count it.
about the increased, building of they're planning of building and jobs coming out there, you're gonna look at more cars coming, cause it's a mess
Possibly.
out there. I've driven it, I've seen what it's like with the kids.
Certain times a day,
It is terrible.
It is congested certain times of the day. And congestion is a personal definition. Some might wait 30 seconds and not be concerned, and some might wait 30 seconds and be aggravated.
Real quick, two more questions on that, and then I can turn it over. Are the costs associated, in the event that the city decides not to close Day Street and keep that open, you mentioned that the city might be requested, I don't know if it's requested of the city or mandated by ABC or PUCO to contribute towards the upgrades there. Is that just Day Street that we're talking about, or is it the other intersections?
Oakwood and Diamond, deals have already been made with Akron Barberton on that. That's not gonna cost the
Okay.
city or Ravenna anything because they are mainly there's, the main portion of it's circuitry upgrade.
Okay, so we're just focused on Day Street.
Correct.
And that was my only other question. You mentioned on Diamond, that project, that PUCO contributes 161,000, AB potentially would cover the rest, and that's PUCO is either gonna upgrade that 100% or AB will contribute to that? Do I have that right?
For, you said Diamond?
Yeah, one of your slides, you had the Diamond project, PUC contribution at $161,000, and then below it, you had AB potentially to cover the rest. And I don't know if that's where I was coming from, just to clarify that the city this isn't kind of you play with us on Day Street, we won't require you to pay for the other crossings that are still in the
Andrew,
works.
I think those were monies that were already spent
Okay.
to those upgrades.
Okay.
Not additional cost, I think I'm correct on
Yeah,
that.
Oakwood and Diamond, I know I put, that was a mishap on my slide. The contract has been signed for Diamond and Oakwood and
Okay.
Akron Barberton, that they're getting those dollars from the PUCO, they're covering the rest for the upgrade.
Okay, thanks. And then, Mr. Calfee, do you have a specific question, or should I ask that about?
No, I just had a question about the origin of the first request of the closure. Did that come from Akron Barberton Railroad, that they said they'd like to close it? Or did the PUCO say, this is something that we think need to be closed? I just want to go back to the first idea of the closing. Where was the genesis of that? Where did it come from?
The first idea came from, we had come up here in October to look at some of the other crossings.
Okay.
The Oakwood and the Diamond project. And in the prep work for it, I gathered the data we have on hand for everything. And from that, we saw the low number of cars, the narrowness of the street. So you could say maybe it was probably a joint discussion.
Okay.
And if I had my diagnostic form with me, I would show you on page 3 of it. It talks about, is this a candidate for closure? It's a question we always ask. If most of the time it's an automatic no, because it's a state route, it's a main thoroughfare. We looked at it as a possibility. We looked further into it, had further discussion, and here I am tonight to discuss it. So, joint discussion.
Thank you. I know the other one that you were going toward, but I also would say that I think we need to get a little bit more information about what the people on the street think. We have a fine citizen here that's right at the corner of Day and the railroad who says close. Someone else says don't close. I think, oh, I'm sorry. I think that's something that we may need some input on. And finally, the thing that Mr. Kluge was mentioning is the Akron Barberton Railroad, when they've done some track improvements on the section of the railroad that comes through Ravenna, have left a whole lot of debris on the sides of the railroad tracks completely through the city, which they have never cleaned up and is an eyesore, and it's a concern that we have whenever they have done improvements. And we think that needs to be cleaned up especially, and that's kind of a pet project of mine, but I just wanted to get that in there. Sorry.
Is there a certain crossing that comes to mind where this mess is?
It runs the entire length from probably, yeah, Red Brush all the way over to
Oakwood Street.
Oakwood, or maybe a little bit farther.
Farther.
There's
goes farther.
There's about 10 piles of railroad ties on the side of the railroad track. That's another thing. Sorry to interject that, but that's in there. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, they
Back to
probably
the-
put it there because I know they have a significant right of way. I'll have to, that's one thing I'll talk to my legal folks about to see if there's something in our rules that we can kind of force them to clean that up because it could be a potential hazard. Now, I know if it was, depending upon the angles of the intersection, it could impact visibility. And if you see other things like that, you know, go to our website, talk about the crossing, give us the DOT number, give us information. That'll help us. We can send an inspector out to take a look at that.
Well, you
and
don't know,
possibly write a defect and have them fix it.
you don't know if you're gonna hear from the railroad. I mean, you know, if they're not gonna show up tonight, you know, I mean, that's another thing. Like, right now, I'm really reluctant to deal with any dealings with the railroad. I am really reluctant to put our neighborhoods in any type of jeopardy. I feel that by them not showing up tonight it's just kind of, again, showing that, you know, they really don't care what the neighbors have to say. And the other thing is, I think, we have to do a better job of communicating with our neighbors.
Yes.
Because had we and council not have reached out to these people, they wouldn't have known. Just like with Freedom Street, they wouldn't have known. And something this important, a letter shouldn't have went out Thursday evening
no,
when
a
a meeting
couple
was
weeks
Monday.
ago or more.
So, it's bothersome to me that that's how we choose to communicate,
It's-
so.
It's
And-
poor.
And Amy, on that note, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone
Yes.
that came out tonight. Your time is very valuable, and we appreciate hearing from you because this does impact you. And we hope to continue to hear from you as we work through this, because this doesn't impact where my house is, but it certainly impacts where all of our houses are. So we appreciate you guys being here.
And I believe that the railroad has a lot of questions to be answered. And a lot of you people have addressed certain things that can't be answered unless it's a railroad rep. And without that, I don't see this going anywhere without someone being here and specifically answering certain questions. There's just too many things, there's a big void. I'll leave it at that right now.
Okay, thank you.
And if they have, real quick, if you guys have problems with the jumping right now, in the meantime, please reach out to our police department. Let Chief Wallace know if there's certain times of the day, like if you notice they're after school, he'll be more than happy to have someone sit there and, you know, maybe if there's a little bit.
It just comes and goes.
Yeah, I mean, but if you're noticing a certain time, or if you're able,
Accidents are late night.
just to, you know, our police department is there, and Chief Wallace is always open to hearing this. Give him a call, ask for him directly, or email him, and he'll make sure that, you know, we do, you know, get some extra coverage, if that's okay, Jeff, that I say that. Because that is something that we can do our best to try to control a little bit better for the neighborhood, okay? Sorry about that.
You good, Indra?
Yeah, thanks for letting me.
Okay, no, very good. All right, Tom, thank you for your time. Residents, thank you for coming in. This discussion will go on. Again, no decisions are being made anytime soon, so we'll continue to follow up with everybody. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. I'm not local to your community, so I definitely appreciate your input on this process.
And Tom,
Thank you.
that's what I was just gonna ask. Hey, Tom? Tom? Do you mind sending an email either to Matt or to our clerk of council with your presentation for reference? Is that all right?
Sure. I'm not connected.
Okay. I'll reach out to you. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
I'll take some.
All right.
It's not true.
This is just half hour west of
Interesting discussion, though.
Thanks, Tom.
Angela.
Sure. Sure, sure. Yeah.
Okay, if there's additional conversation, can you please take it outside? We still have a few agendas on this committee and many more committees to get through tonight. Thank you. So the next item on this committee is the citywide cleanup. It will happen again this year.
Chairman, is your mic on?
Can you hear me?
You move it closer.
How's that? The citywide cleanup will take place in May this year. Do we have the dates for specific wards at this time?
Yeah, wards 1 and 2 is May 6th, Ward 3, May 13th, and Ward 4 is May 20th. And Conrad's Disposal will be doing that.
You said 6, 13, and 20?
Mhm.
Okay. Will we have a letter and something going out to all residents with the water
It's gonna be
bill
on the
too?
water bill.
Okay,
It's gonna be
perfect.
on the April water bill.
Okay. Paul, you have any concerns moving us forward? If not, we'll,
No, I'm all for that.
okay, we will go ahead and move that item forward. Next item on the agenda is a striping contract. Has been awarded to JD Striping and Services. Again, the striping program, they update all crosswalks, turning lanes, stop bars, within the city limits. Do we have a final cost on that one?
$83,367.
And that is
Yes.
part of the paving
That is part of the annual paving program.
program.
And JD Services office is on Beecher. He's a local company.
Beecher, there you go.
Okay, any problem moving that forward, Paul?
No, they're a very efficient company. They've been doing this for many years, and one thing I really like is patronizing a local company that's efficient. As Mr. Finney just mentioned, they're local.
Okay, we'll move that item forward as well. Management update this evening, sir?
Just to comment on some of the discussion that was here, I don't think that the railroad will be that difficult to work with. We spent a lot of time with them, when we were working on the, LG Chem project, with that. Just as a bit of history, you will recall that railroad was owned by Portage County. And we gave Portage County $200,000 when they purchased it. There was almost no money made on it. We never received a dollar back. We ended up trading land for that, at this point in time. So the thought this guy with this railroad is out making tons of money at this point. And I don't know what he's making, but I do know that when we owned it, they were lucky to make anything, in terms of profit. Now, when they came in, they know how to run a railroad. And as far as the speed goes, they would not be raising the speed on that at all. There are other issues besides, wanting to get the thing done fast. The tracks have been improved to Freedom Street. They're gonna have to improve all of the rest of, the rail if Menards goes in. But they're waiting to see if they're going in or not, because they can service all the people on the other side of the road right now with what is there. But, I think that if we have another session and you want them here, we'll call them and talk to them. We can do that. We've worked with them enough, but, and you're right, they could have answered a lot of questions tonight and made it whatever way they wanted. The train's gonna go through. The biggest difference, they won't blow the whistle one time. You'll drop one of those off. Quite honestly, in terms of bad intersections, the one I'd love to see fixed is out south of town, where people have to across to get back and forth to their homes, and there was a girl killed out there a few years ago.
Oh,
on the
yes.
tracks. And those trains are not doing 10 miles an hour.
No,
They're flying. I'm glad the folks, we got the number of people here. I don't know how they got the message, but I'm glad they got here. And I myself am not beating the drums one way or the other. The train's gonna go through. The question is whether you're not, it's gonna not be a regular stop, or you're gonna have to have the lights and things in it. And by the sounds of things, if he looks into it, he said he would. If there's gonna be pedestrian traffic across it, you're right, there will have to be some sort of sound there. But it's strange with kids wearing iPods, and I had an uncle who worked on the B&O Railroad, and he had the misfortune of killing two railroad, they were management people who were checking the tracks, but they had plugs in their ears. And he laid on the horn, and they did not hear it. And of course, he tried to stop the train, but he couldn't. And I see this every day at my house with teenagers. They've got those in, and they have no idea what you're talking about at that point. But I just wanted to say that there is some sort of a working relationship there. And I'm be happy to do what the neighborhood wants. If we can work either way on that.
All right, thank you. At 7:32, I will adjourn the Streets and Sidewalks Committee meeting. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start the utility committee meeting at 7:32 with a request for an easement by the Hyatts on Talmadge Road for the reason of a natural gas line going over, which would be Ravenna property because of the feeder canal. If some don't know, the feeder canal actually feeds into Lake Hodgson, and Sandy Lake does, so there are several feeder canals that go into that lake for our water supply. So they want to have access to that natural gas line.
It's just like, when I read this, I see like a give and take, or,
Exactly, yeah, that's exactly what it is. Our water plant, the Hyatts have allowed our water plant access to maintain that section of canal. And in exchange, they've asked to cross our line with a gas line so they could have gas service. Kevin Bevilacqua and Tim Stevens both endorsed this trade-off, so to speak, and Kevin has formed a pretty good relationship with the Hyatts. They want to memorialize the agreement through the easement.
That makes sense, I'm good with it.
Okay, I do not see this as an emergency.
And Mr. Semino did approve as it's written. I do not believe I put it in as an emergency, but whatever the tracking sheet shows, we can stick to it.
No, it's not listed as an emergency.
Okay, it's not listed as an emergency, there we go, perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, so if there aren't any other comments, then I will ask for a management update pertaining to this.
I don't have any right now.
Okay, thank you very much. At that time, the utility committee will be adjourning at 7:34.
at 7:34, I will convene the planning committee meeting. We have 5 items on the agenda, and try to get through these as quickly as possible. The first one is just our yearly CAC food program at City Park. You have the information in the packet, no changes from previous years. This is just an arrangement to provide food for needy children under 18 or those who are 18 or older with physical or mental disabilities at the city park.
Yearly thing.
Was it?
It's a yearly thing.
Yeah, yearly thing. Okay to pass that on?
Absolutely.
All right. Next item on the agenda, so the Ravenna School District is looking to add a levy to the ballot. I guess this would be in May. And we have a draft resolution in your packet. I assume this came from the city, the school system? Oh, you wrote it? Oh, great, okay, nice job. Any questions about the resolution? Just as a resolution from the city supporting the school levy? Okay to pass
Yes.
that on? We will forward that on. Next is another resolution for Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month. I believe Christina asked that we do this during our last council meeting. I'd like to say I drafted this, but I don't know if any of you are aware of a new phenomenon that we have in the technology world called ChatGPT. So this is a ChatGPT original.
Really?
You did edit
Absolutely.
that.
I didn't change, I read it, well, I put in the title.
Yeah.
The whereases and the therefores, except I think someone added the last therefore section stuff, which is just standard language we always had. It was so good, I couldn't figure out a single change.
Artificial intelligence
Yeah.
wrote that.
Yeah, it's better than real intelligence sometimes. So, just so you know, I'm just putting it out there, because I'm not taking credit for it. But you read it and you said it was pretty good? Okay.
It's exciting.
All right, in spite of that one interesting development, we'll, this, okay, anybody have any questions, or good to pass this one on? Amy?
I'm all good
Tim?
with it.
All right. Then, the next item on the agenda is, seems like it's come up from time to time, is tree lawn parking, property maintenance, and other enforcement. And I think in your packets are some elements of our code that deal with parking on the tree lawn. I don't know, Bob, did you add this to the agenda?
I did not.
You added it.
I added this is really just to itemize, we don't have to get into the details of the enforcement or the penalty per se, because I think we're gonna be talking about the trash one and public health and safety. But I wanted to see, as was mentioned the last meeting, with enforcement around tree lawn parking or property maintenance, if there's any other things that we should be aware of, or take a look at the penalties that were related to that you feel might be coming up. And again, I guess we can itemize these, and maybe keep this agenda item here in planning as we figure out what those are, and if we should look at the penalties, number one, and if those need updated to reflect, the nature of the ordinance that might be enforced. An example, the $250 one as related to trash, we're looking at editing that.
Don has just been writing parking tickets. He'll send a warning, he'll send a letter, he'll send actually put a warning on the windshield, and then actually write a parking ticket.
Okay. Is that the only, right now, like the big one, tree lawn parking tickets in general that you're seeing? Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
So is that the penalty for
it's very difficult to try to charge a fee when we don't know who owns the car. We can't run license plates, but we can sure write a ticket.
Yeah, I didn't see any.
There is a separate ordinance around parking, and I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but there is, I think it was between 1 and 10 days, it was a $5 fine, I want to say. Between 10 and 15, it went up incremental, and I think the max was $25 or $50. So I'll have to find that to see if that's true. But I think that was the maximum fine. It was either $25 or $50 maximum if they didn't pay it by a certain date. And I guess, Chief, you're here. Do you know offhand if that's true?
What's that?
The parking ticket fine, oh, you have it? That Chelsea has in our packet that I didn't look at. So 452.23, it says, within 5 days or 120 hours, let me find it. $10 within 5 days, and 6 to 30 days, it will be $25, and then 30 days or over, it would be $50. So the maximum fine currently for parking violation notices is $50. The minimum was $10. Thanks, Chelsea.
Yeah, I guess my question though is, does the part of the ordinance, chapter 452.13, which is defined as front yard parking, does it point to that?
No, and that's same, that's what my question was, and I was trying not to get in the weeds with it, but moving forward, if we take a look at front yard parking, the penalties with that, what does it point to, and should we have something similar to this 452? So that we're not, it's not an egregious amount that we're penalizing residents for. That was the idea behind this.
So you want,
So for now, I think.
look at this and see if the dots are connected and that kind of thing?
Yeah, for now, I think we keep it here, and I'll do some research and come back with a proposal, if that's all right with everybody
okay.
for the next meeting.
Because in number 3, I guess you could look at it different ways. If it was asphalt, concrete, gravel, brick, there's several, looks like variables there
Well,
as well.
You're talking about two different things.
Yeah.
You're talking about front yard parking, and you're talking about tree lawn parking.
Yeah,
So you have
that's
to be
where I'm
specific.
confused. Are we talking about both?
This is under front yard parking.
I think so just to back up, the first step was just identifying what I said at the last meeting. We haven't enforced tree lawn parking, and I don't know how
But
many
we are
years.
enforcing
He
tree
isn't.
lawn parking.
Correct. So with that knowledge, knowing that we're going to enforce it moving forward, taking a look at the penalty related to that, and seeing if we should make any edits or take a look at the penalty in particular. And my question then is, if there's anything else that we're starting to enforce that we haven't recently, I want to know what that is, and then the penalties related to those, to see if those need any updates. I get that's the goal of this. Identify what's being enforced, take a look at the penalties to see if those need updated. So that's the goal.
Okay.
And I was trying not to get in the weeds, and we did, so I apologize, but.
Okay. But it might be a good time to throw out the consideration of hiring somebody to
Sure.
do the
absolutely.
enforcement, parking enforcement, and something.
There is a revenue component to that.
Yeah, I mean, if something like that pays for itself, why wouldn't we don't want to do it? Okay, but we'll leave it on
Yep, and I'll
for
come.
next month and
come back.
perhaps beyond. All right, so the next and last item on our planning agenda, which was going to be a joint meeting with Community and Economic Development to discuss moving forward with the comprehensive plan. We talked about this, we had a presentation from Todd Peets not too long ago, where I believe he presented the Brimfield plan they had just done recently. Cheryl's not here, so we don't necessarily have to convene, or we could, I don't.
So I spoke with Cheryl prior to the meeting, and she's in favor of moving the city comprehensive plan forward. The goal with that was just to make sure that we didn't lose sight of it. It's in the budget currently, which we'll talk about at the very end, and then just moving forward with the contract so that come time to work with Todd Peets in the county that, we were all ready to go. That was the goal.
Okay, so when Todd was here, he mentioned it would be around June before they would be able to start working on a comprehensive plan for the city of Ravenna. You have in your packet some of the elements that he gave us regarding what the plan would be, and also the costs, which on the last page of this is about a little under $50,000. We get some credit because somehow this county gives us a certain amount of hours, yeah, that we can use towards this project. So there's nothing right now to do in terms of the actual plan. That won't get started until this summer. But I think we want to move forward
So we're ready.
that we, even though it's in the budget, we want to vote to approve it.
Yeah.
And it is under $50,000, so there's no bid requirement. Although when it's between a county and a city, I think that may be a waiver from the bid process anyway, but regardless, it's under that amount. So, anybody have any questions
No,
about what the comprehensive plan is?
I
what the-
think Carmen had brought up too, with planning commission is a good point as well, that maybe Bob can maybe bring up, because Carmen was gonna try to come tonight, but she is also ill. So,
I
but
think there
she
was-
felt that also she could see value to this as well on a planning commission side. So maybe you can,
There was a statement, I believe it was titled, or a word used, community plan in,
It was master plan,
master plan, okay, yeah, thank you, master plan. There was a reference to master plan.
with harmonious.
Harmonious.
She was asking if we had a copy, and we said, no, we don't have a copy. Not heard of a master plan. And it's 1074-03, I think, is the code section.
so, but this comprehensive plan is what Cheryl has talked about and
Yeah.
has brought up, so I think, with all of our, zoning and different things that it will put us together better as a city, the puzzles, the pieces, and hopefully, will allow us to have better control over some of the things that are going on,
Yeah.
and showing up in our community legally as well.
Well, yeah, it'll tighten up ordinances like that, which refer to things that don't exist, but I think it provides a strategic plan for how we zone and build and map out our city for the future.
Speaking of which, I don't know if this kind of goes to this, but I did see in today's paper where the city of Aurora put a
Memoriam on.
memoriam on tobacco shops, and I want to say kudos to them. Because some of, again, a lot of these things that are coming into these communities, a lot of them are not things that communities want, and
Yeah.
you're promoting, things in your community that,
No, I think that's a good point. Not necessarily that we want to create a comprehensive plan that looks to restrict things per se, but I think if we have a plan that says what we're trying to do, if we have a plan that says, this part of the city, we want to encourage industrial development. We want to encourage home ownership in our residential, zones. Those things provide a blanket, and so then when we look at where we put storage facilities and stuff like that, we kind of can puzzle them right into where our strategic plan would suggest they should go. So I think it's a way to shortcut all these little initiatives that are out there independently.
Mr. Karras, who is working with them, Todd and the planning department, on the work that's been done since the last presentation to this one? Because it appears that they've put together a plan for months that things are going to be done, and meetings that are going to be held, and surveys that are going to be done. And I didn't know who from the city is helping give direction to those efforts.
I don't know.
I think this is a plan of what they possibly, maybe Todd gave this of what he needs.
I think that's something that, it's a roadmap of what
Yeah.
he's using.
Yeah, I don't think anything has been set up.
I imagine you'll be.
If you look at the timeline there is what I'm talking about.
You talking about that box?
Yeah,
thing?
the timeline has dates
Yeah,
and
that's
things
new.
put in that's new.
Yeah, that schedule is
Yeah.
new, and I assume that came from Todd's
Okay.
office, but I don't know for sure.
Okay.
Do you know? Does anybody know how it got in the packet?
I don't, and that would be a question, I believe, for Cheryl,
Oh,
but
maybe
I
she
think
got
to your point, Mr. Galfi,
Okay.
the 2 points of contact, I think, would be the chairs of CED and planning on this particular, moving this forward, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and we'll take a closer look at that plan. schedule that is, when we get closer to actually doing the work. But I do think we want to prepare an ordinance specifically saying we're going to expend the money to do this. Yeah, have a contract with it. So we, Amy and Tim are good for moving that on? Okay. Now, I did want to, I know it's not on the agenda, but we've had a very lengthy process for hiring the consultant for our design review guidelines and historic preservation. I think we have sort of an update, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, because maybe I misread your email. But I think the plan is, because you got some feedback from CLG about how we should apply for this grant. The original plan was we were applying for a grant that would pay 60-40, us 40, 12,000, 60% by CLG. Their funding would pay for 18,000. It looks like they're advising us to go for the whole thing. And they, if we got the grant, then it wouldn't cost the city anything.
Good.
So that was the update. And I just want to make sure, one, I got it right, and that council knew that, you know, things, if we are fortunate to get the grant, it's real good possibility we won't have to expend any city funds for that.
So Julie and I have put it together with the comments from the grant administrators. And today I sent requests for support, letters of support, which I was advised to do.
Right.
To Yale,
Liga? Okay.
Todd Peaks, Rick Oxley, and then Main Street. So,
Okay.
you know, that would be 4 letters of support, which I'm sure they'll do it.
Yeah.
And then we'll submit probably next week. We'll submit.
All right, we'll keep our fingers crossed. That's our formal agenda. Mayor, do you have a management update for us?
No.
Okay. Well, in that case, at 7:52, I will adjourn the planning committee meeting. And there is no CED meeting, which would be nice, so.
Cool, I believe we're gonna skip CED and then go
Oh, I wasn't sure
directly
if it was-
to.
I was thinking it was Christina. Okay. All right, I'll try to make this short and sweet as well and keep on rolling. Okay, first item on the agenda tonight, I'm gonna call public health and safety to order at 7:53, so we're not too far off schedule. It was scheduled for 7:45. The first item on the agenda tonight is striker agreement for new Lucas device and heart monitor. This is, it's at $3,000 a year for 5 years. It's a service maintenance agreement, so it's something that is needed for our Lucas devices that were a donation to the city. So this is just entering into a contract to be able to have a service contract with that. Any questions? Okay. Next item on the agenda, which kind of is funny, it goes to the next thing that we talked about earlier. This was actually sent from Brian Huff as an FYI email, and I really thought, I liked it. And I said, you know, let's bring this to the committee and see what council thinks about this. It's rail safety resolution, and Brian had sent this, and it's a resolution urging the legislative branches of the federal government as well as the state of Ohio to enact legislation to further protect the citizens of the city of Ravenna, Ohio from the inherent dangers of train derailment on tracks located in our city. And so this was actually, you received this from the National League of Cities email?
Correct, yeah.
And it's members of the U.S. Senate and the House of Representatives. And I just thought, you know what, the more the merrier, we, that can go in together with this. We did have an event in Ravenna Township that could have been much worse than it was. I mean, it was detrimental to still, have that happen in your backyard. But again, I feel like we are a team in Ohio, and I think if we can all stick together on this and do a resolution, and showing support on this, I feel that we should do it. So I wanted to bring this to Public Health and Safety and see if you guys were okay with doing it. There's no legislative, thing on our end. It's basically showing that we're in support of this. This National League of Cities, the information, I can have Chelsea email it to everyone. I don't know if everyone received this. Well, you should have received it from Brian. But, it talks about, and encouraging, the communities to support Congress to improve rail safety in the U.S. So I wanted to bring that. Thank you, Brian, for sending that. Are we okay to move this forward?
Yep.
In this committee? Okay. All right. Just thought it was ironic it was on the same night. Just worked out that way. Wasn't intended. Okay. Next item is a $200 donation from Edward, I cannot talk tonight, Edward Segerst. Is that with you, Jeff?
Yeah.
So it's just a,
Yeah, he lives over on Stevens. He's lived here for several years. Well, he and his wife moved here over on Stevens because to get closer to her treatment. She was being treated at the hospital, and she passed away. He still likes living on Stevens and wanted to donate to the police department for equipment or whatever we needed, and he gave us a $200 check.
well, thank you. It's wonderful. And thank you to Mr. Segerst. Appreciate the donation, and I know our department will put it to good use. So we'll, as Mr. Rybel would say, we'll take the money.
Take money and run.
And run, yes. Okay, well, so we'll agree to accept that. Next item is the codified ordinance, chapter 1060.99 penalty. And this stems back from my wonderful topic of trash. And as was stated in our last meeting, that the $250 fine was not correct, that we were going to amend that. So this is one thing that, there was a couple things in that current ordinance that council did not feel was something that we wanted to have in that ordinance, and that felt that there should be changes. Also, along with that, I did have, and Chelsea, I don't know who all you, Andrew, were you gonna say something? Oh, sorry. I didn't know if you had made this to everybody or just our committee. Okay, so if everyone did get the November 14, 2022 City Council Public Health and Safety meeting minutes, when I seemed a little distraught last week, like I saw deer in headlights when I acted like nobody knew what I was talking about, I wanted to go back because I distinctly remember, and previous to this, multiple conversations, why it was so important to try to get this ordinance on the books, because my intent was to help the administration and to help clean up the neighborhoods. It wasn't to, go after senior citizens or disabled people and fine people for $250, but my intent was to help the administration enforce some of our codes that were currently on the books, but I was told because in the current code that we have, it stated practical and convenient on our ordinance, so therefore it was hard to enforce trash can location because it stated practical and convenient. And what does practical and convenient mean to you? So in this, and I won't go into too much detail, but I will say Ms. Michael stated that the trash has been an ongoing issue and discussion at council. She stated she spoke to Mr. Finney and is looking into what property maintenance department can do and assist in this. Ms. Michael read the current trash ordinance and referenced to a resident that this is in the violation of overflowing trash. Is that the part? No, this is the part, sorry. The second item was enforced by the property maintenance ticket. Mr. Rose stated that he and Mr. Finney discussed the matter and the other municipalities' cans and do give warnings to tickets. Mr. Finney explained that he has discussed the subject to the police department and will be providing them with ticket. Ms. Michael asked if there's anything they could do. All right, now where's the part? Okay, I'm sorry. I should have circled the part that I should have read first. Ms. Michael addressed the section of the codified ordinance which included the placement of trash can receptacles in the places that is practical and convenient as being wording that could be amended to be more specific. She said that she will meet with Dawn to come up with the more specific language so council could bring it back. So we had talked in great length at meetings, and it does go in here more depth about that particular conversation, but I just wanted everyone to know that this was talked about openly in council, so that's how it got to the point to 3 readings. So the point right now that we want to amend is getting that $250 changed. Andrew had suggested, when I talked with him, possibly going after, the same scenario that we have with the tree lawn parking, or, where you get a violation sent to you, a warning, and, a $50 fine. Nobody wants to put anybody in jail for trash. I mean, let's face it, trash, we want people that have, drug problems and stuff like that in jail, not trash. We want to enforce it, and we want people to be educated that, trash does not belong in the front yard. But we also did state in there that it was going to also be the discretion of the service director. So if somebody has a disability, or if somebody has, a reason that they can't get that trash not in the, in the front of the yard, that would be the discretion of the service director as well. So,
Amy,
there's
are you referring to trash can location or garbage?
the
in
trash
general?
can location
Okay,
is
trash
what,
can
yes.
location.
Mhm.
So I think I was asked after our council meeting to draft some changes to 106099, which is the penalty part of the ordinance, and nobody really gave me any direction, so I just came up with it myself, and I didn't ask ChatGPT to help me out. So what I thought might be a good approach, and this is just a draft form so we can change it, would be that you would get 3 warnings. In other words, if there was a violation, the city would alert the resident, you're in violation of whatever number, 1060, 13, or 10.
99.
Well, the part that defines where the cans go.
Okay.
And then, if nothing happens, you might get a second one. Nothing happens by that point, and no fines or anything would be levied against the person. Then, upon getting 3 violations, you could be fined up to $250 and 30 days in jail, which is what typically violations of other parts of that chapter incur. And then anything after 3 or beyond would still be just the $250 for each offense. I mean, at some point, if someone's just not complying, you gotta get their attention. Now, we could change that if you want, but I'll tell you the simple reason I did that, because it was easier to cut and paste the information, and I don't know if it's a $50 fine, what level of misdemeanor that would be. This would be a 4th degree misdemeanor. So I didn't really want to look up what a 5th degree misdemeanor was.
My question is, if we look at 106099, paragraph B, it says that they're guilty of a misdemeanor of the 3rd degree, and the fine shall be not more than
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
that's
so,
13. I don't know what 13 is.
yeah, so,
That's a different part of the.
That's
I could look
dumping,
it up.
I think it was what.
okay.
so-
Yeah.
It
that-
just applies to
That was already there. That was just to provide people who violated 106013 with a more stiffer penalty because they thought that was a higher level.
So we do not have anything in 1060 for what the penalty would be
Correct.
for violation of 106010.
Correct.
We do, no, we do,
That was-
because 1060-99A, paragraph A, talks about anything in that chapter except for 1060-13, which has its own higher level. So right now, anybody in violation on the first offense is subject up to $250 and 30 days in jail. I added C, and I know this is out of order because 1060-10 comes before 10, but again, I didn't want to do all the editing. But that I added to provide the 3 warnings and, and then applying. So basically, I'm just adding 3 warnings before applying the, does that make sense?
So,
I don't know if I'm
Yeah,
making
I
sense
guess
to me.
one of my questions is though, when it says shall be fined no more than $250,
Yeah,
are they fined less now?
I don't know.
Have we ever
It's
given,
not
have we ever given
precise.
fines on this?
We use chronic nuisance if we're gonna fine.
Right.
And I
Okay.
think that's
And is
what
it
we should use
250?
here.
Oh, it is,
too.
okay.
Yeah,
Well,
I
you could
think it
still
should
do
go to
that.
Because,
chronic
Rod, you're
nuisance.
talking, so that would take the jail time and
Right.
everything out of equation.
And I don't think jail
Well-
time should
No.
even be an issue for
So-
this. I think
That's
it's
ridiculous.
crazy.
I think we should just use, like, the trash, like, if they have to go send like 3 letters.
I agree.
We just send out a nuisance abatement, just like we do for like PD, nuisance 911 calls.
I think they
You know,
should get
that
a
is
fine if
just-
they're not going to comply after 3 letters.
Yeah, just
and
have
then
it-
you go to chronic nuisance.
Yeah, after
Well,
three times.
I don't know
They
the,
just get a letter saying, if you don't abate the problem within 30 days, you're gonna get an invoice for $250. Lots of times when people see that, it's like, that gets their attention.
well, that's kind of what it says. What I added says,
But it doesn't, the chronic nuisance does not say anything about jail time.
Right. We need to take
Well,
jail time off that
yes.
because that is just extreme for
yeah.
trash. I mean, you're
Well,
not even putting
but
people in
here-
jail for other stuff. I mean,
well,
why would you
we,
put?
we may need to talk to the law director about that, because we're talking about
Why?
applying
Yeah.
a misdemeanor.
But we're not gonna make it a misdemeanor. We wanna take this out of the ordinance. So why would we,
Just amend it,
all we have
taking
to
all
do is
that
amend it,
out.
Rob, and take it out.
Well, then I get, my question would be how to enforce it. Because once you start levying fines and the reason it says $250 in 30 days is because that's what a 4th degree misdemeanor is. I wonder how we go about the process of collecting if we can't, I mean.
We put it on their taxes.
Yeah, but I know, you
Just
can
like
do
any
that
other
after you go through
violation.
if you go to a court proceeding, and that's why we define them as misdemeanors. But I don't know what the process is. I'm not saying you're right, or I'm right, you're wrong, you're whatever. All I did was take what was already there in terms of the wording and the application of a misdemeanor, and I just added the warnings before it. If you want to go to that other direction, then the question I would ask is, do you want to apply that to the entire chapter? Because then you're going to be out of sync. If it's just a can issue, we'll go in this one way, but everything else still is a misdemeanor.
But we're taking the misdemeanor out.
Anything.
For everything in that chapter?
I just think it would be easier, because trash, that's considered a nuisance. Just have it standard across the board.
And we
If
can talk to
anything
Frank
that's a
about
nuisance,
that,
they'll get
how to properly
these
put it.
Well-
letters.
But my main thing is to get this $250 fine off.
Removed.
Removed
Well-
off this right now and the jail time, because that being in the front page of the paper doesn't really make people, thinking, we're trying to put people in jail over trash, which is incorrect. So,
Well, but I mean, that's the way it is right now.
it was written like that, and we did state we were going to change that.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm not sure how to, because declaring it a misdemeanor is the enforcement, the official enforcement thing. I mean, we've had other property owners, I know, in particular, and we've had to take them to court because they simply would not
For a lot of things, right?
comply. So, and we only got them to owe us money through attaching their taxes as a court order.
That's
So
fine.
I don't know what so I don't know what provisions we have, and if you take those things out of here and people just don't pay, how do we eventually enforce it?
Well,
Because
then, you know, like Bob says all the time, they have these court cases. Sometimes these residents don't even show up to court, so you're
Yeah, but those are
another-
court
you
cases
hit a-
involving
you hit a wall
violations.
again. You know, like if you just use nuisance abatement, I think you're gonna be more successful. That's just
Yes.
what I think.
Well, I
With
don't.
my experience with, when we send these letters out.
Yeah. Well, I think then in that case, I think you need to somebody needs to talk to Mr. Semino and talk about these types of issues. Because from my perspective, I think when we stop declaring these things as, violations of the law, then I don't know what pathway we have to ultimately collect the money. And if people just ignore our demands and we don't have the courts to go to, I don't know how we ultimately enforce these things. But again, if someone else this was my attempt.
Yeah. And I just want to add, and I think having the conversation with Semino, then referring to 106013, making sure that the prohibited dumping is kept in there and the fine and any penalty related to that is still at that level, because we don't want any solid waste being dumped in City Park or on Main Street
No,
like that.
absolutely.
That kind of conversation, I think that should be at that maximum level, whatever it is now, and then we change the trash.
I mean, we don't
ordinance.
want to make it too complex, but
Right.
to the point,
Yep.
what we're expecting at the city, in our neighborhoods. And I think that, the important part is, that we do have standards in our community. I think that we definitely need to start with our rental properties. A lot of them are, there's a lot of rental properties that, I see a lot of these trash issues, and, it's bothersome. So, if we could definitely put this on our water bills, that, we are requesting, or that city has, made this, as part of our guidelines, that, trash cans are not to be in front overflowing with trash, or, somehow communicate to residents that this is what we're trying to clean up our community. And I think that if they're made aware of it, people will make, efforts to try to clean up their area, so.
And I think the only exception would be if someone is actually physically disabled and they can only do so much.
And that would be at the service
The service director's discretion.
So, Matt, do you have anything, since you are in this committee, any thoughts on this? I know.
It's gone full circle like 5 different times. Yeah, it needs to be enforceable, there needs to be notices, and there needs to be a fine, absolutely. To the extent, jail time, yeah. Some things need to be changed, but I'm okay with taking that out and jail time. But in the bigger picture, yeah, you gotta take everything, the whole package into consideration too.
So, as far as amending, how we have it under A with the 1060.99A, amending this and then rewriting A?
I think you need to talk to Mr. Semino about it.
Well, I am, but I mean, this is the part that we're talking about, the changes.
I think you could edit that, and then anything related to 106013, then within that ordinance, it points to 106099, section B or something specific, and that's a question for Semino, or our law director on that, what the logistics of that is, so that we're not pointing to the 3 warnings, but it is, that's my only concern with that public dumping, that we're pointing to the
Right.
correct ordinance.
Yeah, all I can say is, there are other chapters that have penalties because they're enforcement issues. And a lot of them have the same typical language defining a misdemeanor and so forth. This would be, I think, would be out of the norm to do that. And I don't think anybody ever, I can't remember anybody ever facing jail time. That's what typically happens when it gets to court, it's been a long-standing violation. It's not just a one-off. But I think you need to emphasize when you talk to Mrs. Semino, are we carving an exception when it comes to enforcing this one chapter, as opposed to now changing a whole bunch of chapters that have enforcement issues?
Right.
And whether or not, if we take out, you know, the fact that it's a misdemeanor and a court offense, how we actually can ultimately collect on it. I think those are the issues that need to be discussed and sorted out. But I'm in favor, oh, I guess it's, we haven't finished talking. I'm in favor of moving this on in some fashion, because I agree with the premise that we shouldn't be charging a lot of money and scaring people into thinking where their cans are placed in their yard are gonna cause them some heartache and jail time.
Okay. Okay, any other questions or concerns to come before public health and safety? Did you guys have any comments or anything with this?
So what, this is about the garbage, the trash can, not so much the fine. I hate to see them in front of the houses sitting there. Same one with the recycling can. It just,
I agree.
we have a few on our street, and it's like, it's just
It's the same ones.
tacky.
I agree. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it.
We did pass that
Well,
ordinance.
yeah, it's passed already.
Now,
so.
now we're talking about
It
enforcing
wasn't
it.
a fun ordinance to pass, but we did it, some of us. Okay. All right, 8:15, and it's over. Call the next,
8:15, right on time. The Information Systems Committee meeting, we called to order. Some discussion items for this evening. The first one is fishing, keeping just some
Not this kind
basic,
of fishing.
yeah, not that kind of fishing, just some basic information as it's an open investigation, so just gonna share some highlights, not using, you know, details on this. Back in November, an email was received causing a phishing scam to occur. So we wanted to bring that to council to share that with you, just to let you know that it is going on and that our cybersecurity insurance is being put to use in this situation. An email was received in November, a response was made in November, didn't realize it was a phishing scam until January. So it was a long drawn-out process, it's still being looked into. But I wanted to bring it to attention because I think, you know, we've had all this talk about IT and cybersecurity and training to make sure that all these things are getting done, to make sure that we have the policies that we need. I think technology changes daily, to make sure that we're looking at policies, updating policies, you know, being involved in it. So I guess the question that I have is for Brian, as far as the policies, as far as for the city goes, have we adjusted anything since this has happened, as far as how we're doing things? Are we looking to adjust things because this incident has occurred?
Yes, well, I mean, as far as adjusting how we've done things internally, absolutely. I mean, I've been sending out warnings to City Hall staff throughout the last year and even into this year, even before this happened. And we've definitely made some changes as far as if a vendor calls or emails or even mails in something, anything like that, that requests any kind of banking changes, any kind of anything like that, it requires either a phone call or an email to an original source of contact at one of the vendors, not the one that's on the mail or on the email or whatever. It actually requires a phone call or email to one of those people. So that's been made pretty clear, I think, here in City Hall.
So is that an
recently.
adjustment to your policy?
There's not been anything in
Or
writing on that,
are you
no.
guys looking to put something concrete in writing for that? I have
It'd be good,
concerns
yeah.
of this continuing to happen again. You know, we had the scam was someone pretended to be a contractor that we work with, and it was pretty good looking. So,
Yeah, well, and it's another reason why we decided to go ahead and do that phishing training that we've been doing. Because of stuff like that, unfortunately, we started just a little bit too late, and maybe it would have stopped that one. We didn't start it until December.
So we are saying that the scam was successful?
Yes.
It was?
The scam
Okay.
was successful.
It just didn't start?
It's
It
being
was-
investigated.
It was successful?
Mhm.
yes,
Okay.
it was.
It's being investigated by multiple entities right now.
And it happened through the finance department?
That's right,
Okay.
yes.
so will our insurance cover that amount? I mean, we did get
Well,
insurance.
it covers the majority of it. It covers it all minus the deductible, yes. But we're hoping to, we're still got a police investigation going on. If that is successful, then we don't have to worry about the deductible portion of it. So
And how much is our deductible?
it looks like 10,000 on the cyber insurance part, yeah.
And I think it's important to bring it to light, to have a discussion about that this has happened, so that we can make sure we are looking at policies, that we
Yes.
can see the importance of the cybersecurity piece.
I think the policy that he is talking about is that they're double checking. This was a request from a vendor for payment and had a direct deposit with that. The reason it wasn't found until January is the vendor called and asked where their money was. And that's at that point,
And I hear you, however, my concern is Brian isn't double checking right now, but if we don't have a policy in place that we're double checking these, or exactly what we're doing, and Brian's not here anymore, who's to say this isn't gonna happen again?
what should it say?
I'm not sure, I'm just bringing it up to have conversation, that maybe we need to have some checks and balances when we're releasing funds. And like Brian said, one of the checks and balances that he wants to put in place is that we're making that contact through phone call, or we're double checking with the initial person through email to double check to make sure, if someone emails me and says, hey, I'm changing my account information, can you update it for me? That should be a red flag. And so that should be, there should be some checks and balances for that. And we should possibly look at adjusting that policy. I mean, policies change over time, right? Just like our ordinances do. So we need to keep up on some of these things so that we are up to date with the technology that we are up against every day. I mean, some of these phishing scams are good. And so we need to make sure that we are checks and balances as much as possible so that we can try to avoid them. Not if, I mean, they're going to happen.
Right.
And because they just get better and better, and they're smarter than the rest of us. So just to make sure that that's in place, so that we have those conversations, so that, you know, it doesn't, so that we could have different sets of eyes, or even that conversation, a phone call to that company saying, hey, did you change your account information? Would have stopped it from happening.
That's all
Right.
that happened.
Correct. But a policy stating that is what we need so that it continues to happen. And we're being, I don't want to be reactive. I want to be proactive moving forward so that we can stop things like this from happening again.
And they're actually, I just got an email over the weekend here from the state auditor's office. I haven't even got a chance to really look it over yet because I was more worried about budget stuff. But there actually was an email related to this exact same thing that they're sending out statewide, because there's a huge hit throughout the state on this kind of stuff. And as bad as this one was, it could have been a lot more money, and that could have been a disaster. I mean, you know.
Well, I guess one question to ask is, are you sure we didn't, I mean, it took how many months?
Right.
And we did, you know, between the time it happened and the time we found out, could there have been other transactions?
Well, we have reviewed, and we do get, I
Oh, we
mean,
have,
emails
okay.
come in all the time. We probably got emails from a lot of you guys supposedly, because saying you want to change your banking information. Yeah, that kind of
Some
stuff
gift
happens all the
cards.
time.
Could you go get me some gift?
I'll make a
Yeah.
phone call, I won't send
Yeah,
an email.
exactly.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are not so good, where the language is a little bit off, or you can tell, but then, like, this one that we got was very good. I mean, it was extremely good, and it would have been hard to detect.
Yeah.
But the state did put out a bulletin just this weekend, I saw it actually came out, so this is a statewide issue that's
Yeah,
coming out.
I'm not surprised others have had this problem.
And it's not that it's never happened before, but it's really rampant right now.
But I guess one question would be who, and I'm not asking for names, I'm just saying, who has authority to go in and make that kind, because that's a pretty,
Yes.
you know, sensitive thing for someone to be able to go in and change banking information that triggers a financial transfer electronically. And, you know, who does that, how many people, and what approval process should that go through? And are there
It's very
money
limited.
thresholds, you
Right,
know?
it's very limited. I mean, we keep the
Okay.
permissions on the Civica system very limited, so a department head wouldn't have access necessarily to vendor information. Vendor information can only be set up in finance, because we don't want too many people touching those kind of things.
Yeah.
So we have, you know, looked at those things pretty well. Like, department heads can do certain things, but they can't do other certain things. So, we do look at that. And CMI, for the Civica system's a pretty good system too, with restricting those things out, or giving you good suggestions on who can do what. But yeah, I mean, I'm definitely, will forward that email to you and, well, just to everybody, and look at it, and I'll see if there's any suggestions, and they may have certain suggestions in there about updating the IT policy, I'm not sure.
And
I
I
don't wanna guess
appreciate
yet.
that you guys have already adjusted some things,
Mhm.
but I want to make sure that that's concrete, that that's in writing, that's
Yeah.
something that we're going to continue to do. Because depending on who's sitting up here, who's sitting in your seat, that could look different. So we want to make sure that we're moving
Yeah.
forward.
It doesn't get lost, and.
Well, that and these get so good, we want to make sure that we have those checks and balances in place so that it doesn't continue to happen.
And this is the purpose of those phishing emails as well, and the phishing training that we're doing is for this kind of stuff.
Well, before, you had said that you talked to Quality IP, and how many people responded or clicked on the phishing
So,
so far?
Quality IP, we did the training a while back, and now just on Friday, they finally started the first round of the phishing emails that are going out to people. So you guys may have received some, I'm not sure. I think everybody should have got one at this point, so I don't know who the guilty parties are. So far, I think 13 people have clicked on the links citywide. I haven't got a detailed list, I just got that a couple hours before the meeting started, so.
Which is why it's even more
And
important
they
to
were
have the
just sent out
checks and
Friday and
balances.
today, so there could be
Yeah.
more still
Yeah.
working on those, so.
13 since when?
Since the
Since
email went out
Friday?
Friday.
Yes.
But I
Are you
think,
kidding me?
I believe they sent out an email to everybody.
See someone guilty already.
Did you click on the Walmart
No,
gift card?
I feel terrible that we have 13 that have clicked on a
Wow.
phishing email from Friday till Monday.
Well, that's the whole purpose of it.
I
I
mean,
mean,
yeah,
the whole
I
purpose
mean-
is to get people to think about these. I
Yeah.
mean, when we did this training before, I mean,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more than 13 that clicked on it.
Yeah.
And the schemes
So.
get really complex, and
Yeah.
they can be really, really convincing, which is again why those checks and balances need to be there so that when someone clicks something, someone else can catch it. I mean, I'm not blaming anyone. I mean, this
Yeah.
stuff happens, but I want to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
I think part is the policy that's in place.
Yep.
All employees sign the policy that's here, so it's asking Quality IP for updates or recommendations based on their expertise. I might push back a little bit on the email, that it wasn't very complex. And if it's complex for the 13 people who clicked on that phishing test that went out Friday, but looking at it, it was not. And I think that's where you are coming from, and you talked well about the process that's in place on how what those checks and balances are moving forward. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Well, Quality IP, this is not a one-time email they're sending out. This is gonna be
I understand
happening a
on the
lot.
training side, and that needs to continue.
Right.
It timed up perfectly from the incident to your request of
Yeah.
counsel with the phishing training to here we are finding out.
Because the training, I think, started in about December, so the email, that happened right after this happened.
Yeah, so I think it's continued training, and that's, I think, where council has sat and advocated for. Regardless, if they have access to a computer, there should be some baseline training on that.
And so, so that being said, moving forward, looking at our IT usage policy, as what we can do to adjust and change this. There's not even cybersecurity training is required in here.
Right.
So that needs to be added to this, as well as possibly additional training for someone that was one of those 13 people that clicked and shouldn't have. Identifying those things so that we can make sure that we're training our employees that have access to this information.
Is that something that we should make a recommendation to Heather?
We certainly can.
Yeah, I mean, I'm taking notes right now, so yeah. That's probably the first person.
One of the, what we asked Quality IP was, here's the IT policy that's in place, what's missing from it, in there, whether or not we would add to it, what's their recommendation on their end as the experts in the field. So, I think.
And so we can certainly share that with Heather to see if she can make those changes in the policy, or make recommendations to
Like
change
from
the policy.
council, or, that council is recommending this, or how do you, bring it to committee, is that what you're looking that?
I brought it to committee just to share that this is happening, and to let you guys.
She does have written, when we hire, people do get a sheet that they sign.
Yeah,
Well, I think that's-
it's
yeah.
right here, But it doesn't say anything about any cybersecurity training in it yet.
Right.
That has not been added. Plus, I think, I'm gonna have a conversation with her. I think the generic, subject to disciplinary actions deemed appropriate by the city can be, IT stuff is so vast now that I kind of just want to pick this apart a little bit based off some of the feedback that was given to us from Quality IP. And that might be a conversation with Quality IP and HR together to sit down and say, what can we do to make this policy work better for our city? Because we want to make sure that people are trained and that people aren't abusing the technology that they have that's sitting in front of them and that they have access to. So we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to protect our information in our city. Andrew, do you have anything to add on that?
I just think if we're asking people to participate in, this training and whatnot, it should be part of this document, absolutely.
100%, I agree. So I can follow up with Heather to see we can touch base with Heather, see how we can get that in there?
Yeah, sounds reasonable.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions on that? I know it was kind of generic, I apologize.
Did you make this up, Christina?
I did not. This is ours. This is
Oh,
our
That's something
policy.
that's already being signed
This
by
is-
new employees.
But I don't know when the last time it was changed because it's not dated on here.
There's no update on the bottom?
No.
Yeah, if I had to guess, it would have been when Quality IP probably came in, but.
So, and we did get some recommendations from Quality IP on what they felt should be in an IT policy. So I'm gonna sit down and kind of compare those and see if there's anything we need to change on it. Just to tighten things up, like we're talking about, we're talking about a comprehensive plan to tighten things up, right? We're talking about ordinances and cleaning those up and and design review, cleaning that up. I think the IT piece is just as important for us to look at and clean up to make sure that, we're doing what we need to keep our city safe on the tech side.
When it's updated, can council get a copy of it
Absolutely.
updated?
Yep. Anything else on that? So really quickly, the website training is just a discussion piece. I've reached out to Full Spectrum Media, and we are sitting down with them on Wednesday. Some struggles with, and I don't know if anyone else has tried to find notes or recordings or anything on our website. It's super fun. I can't find them. So we're sitting down with them to create a page where we can put all the meeting notes and recordings for every public meeting that's held under one tab. So design review, planning, us, whoever else goes under there, it's all gonna be listed, as well as the type notes, as well as the recordings. So we're meeting with them, and are going to ask that anybody that shares that information on the website or puts that information on the website is trained from Full Spectrum Media on how to do it, so that we can have up-to-date information for residents, easy to find, at their fingertips. So if they miss a meeting and they wanna look something up, everything's available in one space. Was that?
Yeah.
Okay. What else do I have on here?
Budget.
Oh, I'm gonna pass the next item off to you.
Well, we had the budget meeting, so Cheryl, myself, Mr. Calfee was there with Brian to talk through the budget. And Brian, I think one of the questions that we had, and I'll let you speak about the budget, but I wanna make this statement to everybody, was things that are put into the budget. There is the opinion, I believe, of the law director at the time that when something is inserted into the budget, council approves the budget, that does not have to come before council. That's an opinion by the law director, and I think recent opinions. We've asked other cities around us if anyone does that, and the answer is no. So at this point, what I am recommending of council is, it is what it is. Contracts within the budget come before council. Any donations, anything that we have talked about in the past that requires council action comes before council. And it's not that and I'll wait for the law director's opinion, but that's just my request. I know we've itemized some of these things, I appreciate you doing that, Brian. But just based on the peers in the space that are doing the same things we are, nobody else that we've heard from is approving the budget and not requiring those things to come before council. And I understand that might be a little bit more work, but everybody else is putting in the work. I don't understand why we're kind of trying to, and I don't want to say that. I think it's being more efficient, I think, where you're coming from. I understand the work that's being put in. So I just wanted to say that, and I'll stand by on, you know, input from council members, but then also the law director on that, on his thought. I think that's my recommendation to council. 30,000-foot view, but Brian, I don't know if there's any items that you wanted to go through within the budget. I don't think there was general questions that Mr. Calfee or I had during the conversation that were out of the ordinary year to year.
Okay. I mean, I just got a few little notes here, and then if anybody can ask any questions. I didn't get any questions since I've sent this, so. The purpose of this permanent budget is to update the budget that council already passed in July of '22. We've talked to all the different department heads again, went over their needs again, got updated needs from them over the last couple months. We met with NDS, and then of course, like you said, we met with the Budget Commission, the mayor, Kay, you know, and all of us. I sent the budgets out on Saturday. What I tried to do on this one was a little bit different. I sent it out in Excel, but I also tried to highlight and point out the majority of the, you know, significant updates that have been made since. I don't want to rehash all the ones that we already passed in July of '22. I wanted to try to highlight the ones that have been significant changes since the last budget we passed. Revenues, the biggest revenue changes were grant revenues that we had to add in for OPWC and ODOT. ODOT had a huge one in there. I think it's $751,000. That money, it's going to hit the revenue line and the expenditure line. So you're going to see a wash both ways, but we have to book it that way. The state auditors require us to do that. So a lot of the things in there look like there are significant changes in expenditures, but most of them are grant related, in and out. And also we have an advanced payback. Last year we approved the general fund to loan the capital fund money for the Rayanne project. So we have to pay that back. So that's another significant increase in there as well. We also had to add in quite a bit of payroll and pension dollars based on the last union negotiations. They were pretty heavily weighted in this first year, so you'll see some pretty significant increases in those. And that's just the way the unions did. The next upcoming years, you're going to see a lot smaller increases in payroll, so it is very heavily weighted in '23. And also, in addition, in the 224 paving fund, you're going to see the ODOT money, but we're also going to see a significant local share in there too. And that was a little bit different than when I talked to you guys at the Budget Commission meeting. And that was a lot of conversations with Bob on Friday following up. They opened the one bid for the asphalt paving program on Thursday. When they opened that, the bid. They only got one bid, which was surprising in of itself, and that bid was much higher than the estimates they had. And so they did some reevaluations. He met with Dominic. They really went through line by line, reassessed those. And it's not only going to affect that project, but it's also going to affect our local share on the Chestnut Prospect project, the Main Street widening, even potentially the Freedom Street. So he had to really go and reassess the amount of money that we're gonna have to put in, especially with adding that Main Street widening, which was a significant expense. And so what we ended up with there in the budget is a pretty large amount. That fund has accumulated quite a bit of money over the last 5 to 6 years with the tax levies, because not everything's been spent in there. But this year, it would potentially, if everything goes as fruition, if we potentially do all these projects we get on the widening, if we're going to continue with the Freedom Street, and if we do, I know there's some question on the Prospect Chestnut project, but if it actually does get done, and all these things get done, it will draw down that fund some. And that's okay, it's a capital project, it builds funds up for a while. You have a big year, you get like this Main Street project, combined with the fact that these contractors are, and the price, it's not just the labor cost, but it's also the cost of the materials are significantly higher. It's going to draw down that fund if we get all those things done. So that.
And Brian, that fund is the
224 paving fund, it's called. Yeah. So that's where the biggest bulk of the expenditure increases are. And some of it's the grant, but it will draw that down. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that full bore. And I think Andrew did talk about I was going to mention the contracts agreements. The ones I listed in that attachment were some of the routine ones, like the ones you passed today with the food program and those kind of things. So however you guys want to go on that, that was a request for me for last time. So we'd have to get that
Brian-
language. If we did do that, we'd have to talk to Semino, but if there's
I
not an
like
interest in
that
doing
it
that.
comes to us, Brian. I like to be able to see what we're spending money on. I understand seeing it in the budget, but being able to know certainly the CAC agreement is one thing, but it's nice to see that go through, so we're seeing the monies that are being spent. That's
Yeah.
me personally.
So, right. And that's all I wrote down here for now, so unless anybody's got any more questions at almost 9 o'clock at night.
No, I appreciate you walking us through it, and I think we had a good conversation
We
about the
absolutely-
budget and had lots of
Yeah,
questions,
Yeah, the
but
stuff like
lots
the
of good
spring
feedback.
cleanups in there, we got
Yeah.
the comprehensive plan in there, we got a lot of all those things we talked about, like tonight, those things
Thank
are in this current budget now.
Street sweepers paid off,
Yes,
so.
yeah, we're not doing any more leases, so that should be the last of the leases, so. Knock on wood.
So, and this budget will come before committee of the whole, and then we
Correct.
have a special after to approve it, so. That's why it's on IT, kind of an odd place for it,
Yeah.
but we wanted to discuss it, at the committee meeting first, so.
Does anybody have any questions?
I just have one small one. So was there planning to be donating money to Main Street and the Chamber?
So that we kept
Leaders.
out of the budget right now, is that, I believe.
That has to be reassessed for next year.
Okay,
And that needs to be done when we do that emergency budget the last day of December. That's where, we will have to make a decision there at that point.
okay, thank you.
So I didn't look in the budget, but are we giving money to Main Street and the Chamber, same as we did last year?
Yes, there's money budgeted, it's in the 101.117, you'll see it in that section there.
I think they've already received.
Right. And that's what, he meant reassess it for the next fiscal year.
Yeah, and we'll be doing that budget in July of this year, so that'll be a discussion when we set that dollar amount.
I mean, when it comes to things like that, and I think I can see the reason for not just putting them in the budget and saying they're approved because we approved the budget, because it's not necessary that they could get lost in the budget, but from year to year they might. You know, if they're in the budget this year and everyone here knows about it, then, 5 years from now, everybody here is gone. And people are asking, why is this in the budget? That could be a reason. So one way to deal with that, if you wanted some relief in having to go through a process of approval, is to consider multiple year and we've done that before. The first time we approved paying Main Street, we agreed to a 3-year, $5,000 a year, and so it didn't have to come up every year.
Yeah.
But you may not want, council may not want to say that. Last year, we said 15,000, but only for 1 year, and then you have to come back. So I can see it both
Well,
ways.
the problem with that, and we're gonna be testing the waters as everybody else is right now, if you hit the point where you have to start cutting.
Yeah, well,
And you're locked into those kind of agreements.
yeah.
it-
Well, see, I guess my point is that's not necessarily an agreement. That's just us saying, hey, we're willing to contribute. I think we can rescind things like that. You could even craft it, budget providing we will commit to
Yeah, so-
5,000 a year for the next 3 years. So, but that's not like, there's no give and take. Well, maybe that's not the right way to put it. But we're not entering a contract with Main Street, we're just or the Chamber, we're just agreeing to give them money.
Well, I think both of them should be getting back to the way it was before the pandemic. They were still recovering from that at this point in time. But all of the events are available to them now, and they're not losing out because
Right.
we don't allow a group of people in a contained area, that sort of thing. And I think that that's two things that gets a lot of notice, and you're talking about $30,000.
Yeah, personally, I think it's a good investment.
And the thing I like is that they're doing a lot more working together and doing
well in terms of, you know, you're not choosing sides, you're supporting folks.
Is there any other budget questions? And is there a management update? I think we've done enough. I know, but it's on the agenda, so I
Yeah.
asked. All right, then.
Thank you.
We'll close it at 8:45.